Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Marvel. My girlfriend saves the world, and I am responsible for dating. Chapter 61. With the continuous blue beam as the center, within 10 kilometers of the New York battle. At present, there are basically no signs of surviving human activities in the city. Whether it is the streets and alleys, or the sky and the ground, there are alien robots with guns and crawling alien mechanical bodies everywhere. Not only that, there is also the entire appearance is like a supergiant centipede insect, nearly 100 meters long, deformed and terrifying alien warships. The whole body shell flashes with a cold metallic luster, and it is driving at low altitude on the streets less than 50 meters away from the human city. And this is the most prosperous prime location in New York, with high-rise buildings everywhere. Boom, boom, boom. The alien warship accelerated forward with a strong and domineering force. The buildings in front of it collapsed with a roar. The overly high buildings were directly crushed into pieces, and the gravel and dust covered half of the street. Aang. The giant alien warship seemed to have intelligent life, and continued to accelerate in the direction of the outer city, trying to crush the entire street into ruins. Now, who has time to deal with that big guy? The golden red painted Iron Man jet engine was suspended in the air, trying its best to deal with the small aircraft around it, which were as dense as locusts. Seeing this scene, he couldn't help but shout to the communication. But obviously, none of the superheroes participating in the battle could respond to Iron Man's question. Now, the battle in the central battle has entered the white tropical zone, and everyone is in a difficult situation of fighting one against many, and there is no way to get out. Facing the cruel alien battle, even a powerful Hulk has no spare energy. Iron Man sighed and could only fight the alien army while watching the giant alien warship go away to the outer city. Then, a scene that shocked Iron Man appeared. I saw that the warship had not left the scope of the internal battle, and it was accelerating. When it approached the junction of the internal and external battles, it suddenly broke into two pieces. That's right, it broke into two pieces. Iron Man suspected that he had seen it wrong for a moment. A giant alien warship, 100 meters long, was cut in half by some force without any warning. From the head to the tail of the alien warship, the incision in the middle was extremely smooth. The alien mechanical forces inside the warship were all cut flat without any defense or expectation. Bang! The wreckage of the alien warship cut in half fell down and smashed on the street below, and the earth couldn't help but tremble slightly. Under the reflection of the bright sunlight, an extremely fine metal spider silk appeared in the sky above the place where the wreckage of the warship fell. More than one. At the intersection of the street alone, there were more than a dozen spider silks densely crisscrossed and hung densely above the street. Swish, swish, swish. The alien robot that was driving a small aircraft approaching was instantly cut into several pieces of wreckage by the metal spider silk along the way, and continued to maintain the forward inertia and fell down. A silver metal figure with spider patterns stood on one of the metal spider silks. Magnetic spider transformed Shinen. Shinen was not in a hurry to retract the metal spider silk, but constantly deployed his own exclusive metal spider silk at the junction of the battle, with his body as the center, to the urban area of hundreds of meters or even thousands of meters. These metal spider silks were interwoven into a web, and soon quietly covered half of the city. Holding countless spider silks in his left hand, Shinen closed his eyes, and the spider sense extended outward along the spider silk in his hand. 10 meters, 100 meters, 1,000 meters. Everything within 1,000 meters of the spider silk was exposed to the spider sense. Especially the alien existence with a metal body. Goodbye, Shinen whispered. He squeezed the metal spider silk in his hand hard, and the materialized green magnetic force rushed out along countless metal spider silks. It was like a grand trial. Kakaka. In the urban area covered by spider webs, one alien mechanical body after another was destroyed and disordered by the magnetic force overflowing from the spider silk, and fell to the ground without function. At this moment, more than 100 alien mechanical beings died. With a wave of his hand, countless metal spider silks broke and were taken back into his hand. Controlling metal is undoubtedly one of the strongest derivative abilities of magnetic force. With the two extraordinary abilities of controlling magnetic force and super spider at the same time, Shinen can be said to have pushed the ability of controlling metal to another level. After all, even Luna herself, who has the extraordinary ability of magnetism, cannot produce metal from nothing, and can only control the metal objects that already exist in the outside world. But under the strengthening of spider genes, Shinen can metallize his own spider silk. In other words, he can produce metal out of thin air. And with the keen ability of spiders, the control of metal is more exquisite and perfect. I've almost figured out my abilities. Shinen raised his icy blue eyes and used his right wrist for the first time. As his wrist flipped, a metal spider silk with its own magnetic force shot out and quickly sank into the central battle area of the city. This metal spider silk with magnetic levitation effect penetrated for several miles until it was nailed to the headquarters building of Stark Industries. At the same time, the spider sense spread out along the spider silk like static electricity. Found it. Shinen pulled the spider silk violently, and his entire body covered with a metal spider suit flew forward like a silver lightning. An office building not far from the headquarters building of Stark Industries. In the 12th floor, female Spider-Man was breathing heavily, punching hard, and was knocking 2 alien machines out. But from the severely damaged building window holes, more alien machines swarmed in. Although these alien machines were not strong in combat, for superheroes they were crazy and fearless of death, like weapons born only for fighting and killing. In addition, there were too many of them descending from the sky abyss to the city. Even if they were constantly eliminated, their number did not decrease, but increased. If this continued, they would be exhausted to death here in vain. Female Spider-Man was thinking about this, when suddenly, the movements of the alien machines that were drilling in stopped. Then, smooth cracks appeared on their necks, bodies, or limbs. Ding ding dang dang. More than a dozen alien machines were cut into dozens of pieces, and the debris of the parts were scattered all over the ground. As that, spider silk. Spider-Man opened her eyes wide and noticed that it was several spider silks that cut the alien mechanical body into pieces from the outside. Crack. Only one alien robot that had crawled and escaped. It looked at its companions who turned into pieces in an instant, and its metal teeth trembled and made a sound. It was actually afraid. The existence of the alien machinery was also afraid at this time. Fear of the unknown powerful existence outside. Spider-Man did not feel panic, but showed a look of surprise and surprise. Under the spider sense, she already knew who was coming. Tread. Shinen fell like a silver lightning at the window on the 13th floor. He waved his hand casually, and the alien robot in the room that had escaped the disaster was immediately blasted to pieces by the energy wave condensed by the green magnetic field. Countless metal fragments were deeply embedded in the wall on one side. Looking at the dazed Spider-Man in the room, Shinen asked softly with ridicule, "Are you okay? The little spider who wants to save the world." "Of course it's okay." Spider-Woman Gwen faced Shinen, who looked like she was wearing a spider couple costume. Her heart suddenly beat harder than during the previous fierce battle. The girl's cheeks under the spider hood felt a little hot, and a real stream of hot steam curled up from the top of her head, out. Obviously, it wouldn't have been like this before. Due to the nature of the spider's ability, the female Spider-Man faced Shinen at this time and wanted to kiss her for no reason. "Shinen, wait for me here, it will be solved soon." Shinen naturally didn't know what Spider-Man was thinking. He turned and looked out the window. The Stark Industries headquarters building was right in front of him. Stark Industries headquarters building, the observation deck on the top floor. A large technological instrument is placed here, and its base is connected to several thick charging tubes, which penetrate deep into the industrial building below. There is a square, mysterious object similar to a Rubik's Cube floating above this instrument. Surrounding the Rubik's Cube, a huge stream of blue energy flows from it and rises upward into the sky. Obviously easy to see. This is the core strategic item that caused the current situation of Sky Abyss and alien invasion. At this time, a Russian woman wearing a black agent's tight leather jacket, swaying her beauty and charming dark red hair, simply unplugged all the charging tubes at the bottom of the instrument. However, after all 3 or 4 charging tubes were unplugged, the instrument that placed the Rubik's Cube still showed no sign of stopping. "Tell me how to make it stop," Black Widow asked Dr. Shield, who was standing aside. The somewhat bald doctor wearing elegant gold-rimmed glasses was in a daze, with a black luster flashing in his eyes from time to time. He looked at the instrument and the Rubik's Cube object and muttered to himself, "It's too late, there's no way to close it." Black Widow couldn't help but curse. Just then, With a swish sound, a silver figure appeared on the top floor here. Who are you? Black Widow's hand could reach for the special pistol at her waist, and she looked at the mysterious Spider-Man standing nearby with a slender and muscular body covered by a silver metal that resembled an exoskeleton. Shinen did not choose to pay attention to her, and his eyes quickly fell on the instrument that produced the blue light beam. He raised his hand and grasped it with his 5 fingers through the void several meters away. Under the astonished eyes of the Black Widow, the instrument at the bottom of the Rubik's Cube exploded into pieces. Buzz! The Rubik's Cube floating in the air had a stress reaction, and a layer of blue energy light waves surged outward. Run! Black Widow saw this and immediately grabbed Dr. Shield's arm, trying to pull him to escape from here. Black Widow quickly noticed with surprise that Shinen was still standing motionless. Facing the sweeping wash of blue energy light waves, Shinen suddenly raised his hands, and a green energy tide immediately set off. Poof! The blue light wave and the green tide collided fiercely, and there was an annihilation reaction, and they quickly dissipated on the observation deck at the same time. Black Widow stared at Shinen in shock, and a thought suddenly came to her mind: if it were the other party, she might be able to stop all this. Haven't you stopped yet? Shinen whispered to himself, looking at the blue Rubik's Cube object floating in front of him. Even if the technological instruments at the bottom were destroyed, the cube is still overflowing with terrifying energy, continuing to eject upwards to form a blue beam of light. Shinen thought for a while and tried to lift his 2 index fingers. Metal spider silk shot out from his fingertips. But this time, the tough metal spider silk has not touched the blue Rubik's Cube inside. It only penetrates a little into the blue energy overflowing from the Rubik's Cube, and the metal spider thread is immediately annihilated into fly ash. The intensity of this unknown energy. Shinen frowned and opened the palm of his right hand. Green smoke lingered on every finger. It's terrifying that someone can master this kind of power. Dr. Shield on the side seemed to have seen some clues, and exclaimed in wonder as if he was seeing God in person. Black Widow held her breath and stared at Shinen closely, not daring to disturb him. This time, Shinen directly used the magnetism from the source of his extraordinary ability, and the embodied green energy swept forward. Buzz! The floating Rubik's Cube object trembled slightly, and the blue energy it glowed was stronger, and it actually dispersed and absorbed the magnetic energy. Wrong. Not absorption. A flash of understanding flashed in Shinen's eyes. The energy overflowing from this Rubik's Cube is not only high in intensity, but also has the characteristics of space. This is a bit difficult to handle. Shinen was lost in thought. At this time, Black Widow suddenly said, "That scepter." Huh. Shinen glanced at the Black Widow not far away. Black Widow hesitated and said, "Loki's scepter might be able to break through the energy shield of the Rubik's Cube." Who is Loki? Shinen's voice had a slight electronic sound, making it impossible for others to tell that he was just a high school student. Black Widow instinctively said with a hint of awe, "The evil god Loki, he is the culprit that triggered this alien invasion. Now, Thor, the god of thunder, is dealing with him." Shinen said, "Tell me about his appearance." The appearance of an evil young man, wearing a golden horn armor, a cape, and a metal scepter inlaid with gems. As the Black Widow said this, Shinen had already shot out a series of metal spider silks, and closed his eyes to sense. Almost at the moment when the Black Widow finished speaking, Shinen's eyes also opened, found him. Shinen immediately pulled up a metal spider silk, and the whole person was like a silver bullet, diving at a city below at a high speed. Somewhere in the battle in the central city, the 2 people wearing golden horn armor and silver battle armor were entangled together, falling freely from a 30-meter-high building platform to the road below. They fell heavily from a high place to the ground, and the concrete floor was cracked. But almost none of them were injured by the fall, and their physiques were not like humans. Among them, the young man in silver armor holding a hammer weapon was lying on the ground with a painful expression on his face. His empty left hand tightly covered his lower abdomen, where a delicate and small blade was inserted. "Thor, you are still so easy to deceive." Another handsome young man wearing golden horn armor slowly stood up. He held a shining gem scepter and looked down at the young man in silver armor with a wicked and proud smile. "After all, I won. Wait, I will soon occupy this world." The lines of crazy and awesomeness have not been finished yet. Loki was suddenly stunned, but it was the psychic scepter in his hand that flew out of his hand inexplicably. Fly, fly away. Snap. The psychic scepter quickly flew to a place and was grabbed by Shinen, who just fell from a high place. Looking at Shinen, who fell from the sky and took the scepter in his hand, not only the evil god Loki, but also Thor, who was lying on the ground, was stunned for a moment. What did you do just now? Give me back the scepter. Loki's handsome and evil face was cold, and he immediately rushed towards Shinen. Are you Loki? Compared to the somewhat exasperated evil god, Shinen at this time looked more like a god. He seemed to be coated with a layer of metal all over his body after turning into a magnetic spider. His body wrapped in a spider silk battlesuit showed perfect muscle curves. The lingering magnetic energy formed a pressure field outward, and a pair of ice blue eyes calmly reflected the nearby Loki. Being too close to Shinen, Thor instinctively felt that his body was much heavier. He looked at Loki, who rushed forward and couldn't help shouting, "Wait, it's dangerous." This sentence was obviously not said to Shinen. You deserve to die. When the evil god Loki rushed to him, Shinen held the gemstone scepter in his left hand and suddenly raised an index finger with his right hand. Swish! The evil god Loki's body suddenly froze. Loki opened his eyes in disbelief. A tiny metal spider silk pierced through his forehead, broke through the helmet of the golden horn armor, broke out from the back of his head, and sank directly into a building behind him. Loki! Thor couldn't help shouting. At the same time, a ripple appeared in the space about 1 meter behind Shinen, and another Loki suddenly jumped out. A ray of cold light and the joy of success flashed in Loki's eyes. His real body quickly grabbed the scepter in Shinyen's hand with one hand, and stabbed Shinyen's back with a sharp bayonet in his right hand. Faced with this situation, Shinen sighed inexplicably. If it were another person, such as Thor next to him, he might have been hit directly. Unfortunately, Loki faced Shinen. Shinen, who controls both the super spider and magnetic abilities. Not to mention that when Shinen used the metal spider silk to pierce Loki's body, he knew that Loki was fake. After all, the metal spider silk did not convey the texture of piercing through real objects. And when Loki's real body appeared behind him, the spider sense also knew Loki's movement trajectory. This is a bit like playing a CS-type shooting game. The ghost player thought he was invisible, but he didn't know that the opponent player had opened the god's perspective. Why did you provoke him? Shinen stood still approached by Loki's bayonet. The next moment, puff, Loki's happy smile froze on his face. He looked at his right hand. Well, the bayonet he was holding was gone. Where is my knife? Loki looked down at his chest, and soon he realized, oh, it's here. The bayonet broke through the golden horn armor on his body, more than half of it was inserted into his chest, and blood immediately gushed out along the blade. Loki looked up in a daze, and his other hand failed to grab the gem scepter, hovering 5 centimeters away from the gem scepter. These 5 centimeters are like a huge natural moat. No matter how hard Loki tried, his body and hands could not move forward at all and touch the scepter in Shinyen's hand. You have so much metal equipment on you. Shinen shook his head, turned to face Loki nearby, and then raised his right hand. Threads of green energy gushed out, entangled Loki's body wearing golden horn armor, causing his feet to leave the ground and float completely in the air 1 meter low. Crack! The sound of breaking continued to sound, and the golden horn armor began to crack and disintegrate rapidly under the magnetic energy. Woo! Woo! Loki's eyes were full of bloodshot, as if he was being strangled by the neck. His limbs struggled violently, and he clearly smelled the breath of death. So, facing Shinen, who was nearby, fear surged from the bottom of his heart like a tide. He didn't want to die yet. Wait a minute. At this time, Thor, the god of thunder, climbed up while covering his wound and shouted to Shinen, "Let him go. Isn't he the culprit of this war?" Shinen glanced at the golden-haired man wearing strange armor and holding a hammer, and asked curiously. That's right. Thor paused and continued, "He is my brother. We are from the god's domain above the 9 realms. So what?" Shinen became more and more curious. He is an alien, a god, or a devil, what does it matter? The war he caused killed many innocent people. Killing people means paying with one's life, isn't that normal? Saul was choked for a moment, and he said in a deep voice, "Release Loki. I will naturally take him back to the god's domain. Asgard has laws to punish him." Shinen was silent, looking at Loki floating in the air. He himself didn't really believe this set of rhetoric. Take him to a place outside the Earth for trial. Could it be that he was just symbolically detained, going through the motions, and then released? Shinyen's mind flashed through his classmates, the bodies of Wanda's parents, and the nearly injured Spider-Man. His eyes were still as cold as ever. As if sensing Shinyen's killing intent, Thor gritted his teeth, suddenly let go of the Thor hammer in his hand, and rushed towards Shinyen with bare hands, shouting loudly on the way, "Heimdall!" Shinyen just glanced at Thor, his ice blue eyes flickered, and Thor, wearing silver armor, immediately flew backwards. At the same time, a strange rainbow-colored light column suddenly fell from the sky, crashing down where Loki was, completely covering his body. Want to leave? Shinyen moved his fingers, and the bayonet inserted into Loki's chest went deeper, causing Loki to wail in pain. At this moment, he was like a pig, allowing himself to be slaughtered. Shinyen wanted to use the magnetic field to drag Loki down, but the rainbow bridge that appeared also had a spatial attribute similar to the Rubik's Cube. The rainbow light instantly took Loki up and disappeared into the sky of the Earth in a blink of an eye, as if leading to the deepest part of the end of the universe. Thor was trapped on the outer wall of a building. Seeing this scene, he breathed a sigh of relief. I hope you can do what you say and give him the punishment he deserves. Shinyen took a deep look at Thor, and no longer paid attention to the disappearing rainbow bridge. He flew up from the field and returned to the top floor of the Stark Industries building with the gem scepter. Awesome! On the top floor of the Stark building, Black Widow also saw the scene on the ground below. Looking at Shinyen, who ended the battle in less than half a minute and flew back, her lips slightly opened, and her beautiful eyes flashed with a strange look. So strong. The evil god Loki, who Thor couldn't take down for a while, had no room for resistance in front of him. This is a real boss. Shinyen landed on the top observation deck. Facing the cosmic cube suspended in front of him, he did not hesitate and directly manipulated the gem scepter to stab forward. Buzz. This time, the scepter with gems on the tip was not damaged at all, and the energy shield overflowing from the cosmic cube was directly pierced. Breakthrough. New York, Stark Industries headquarters building, on the top floor of the open-air observation deck. Just as Shinyen was about to manipulate the gem scepter and completely insert it into the energy shield, Black Widow's face suddenly changed slightly and said, "Wait a minute." Wait for what? Shinyen glanced at the explosive female agent. Black Widow quickly said, "A nuclear bomb launched by the military is coming to New York. Iron Man has intercepted it on the way. He wants to send the nuclear bomb into the portal in the sky." At the same time, on one side of New York City, a black dot is approaching this side at a high speed. You can see, it is a nuclear missile dragging the airflow trajectory. Right below the nuclear bomb, a golden and red Iron Man is holding it up with his metal hands and back. The hands, chest, waist, feet, etc. of the iron suit, all the driving devices are turned on at the same time. Iron Man is holding the nuclear bomb below, forcibly changing its moving trajectory, while asking the artificial intelligence Jarvis to call Pepper Potts. This is the last tragic farewell of the superhero. Iron Man, who was flying with the nuclear bomb, approached the Stark Industries building, but the call had not been dialed yet. Just when he was about to lift the nuclear bomb up and fly, Iron Man suddenly stopped in the air. The nuclear bomb actually adjusted its direction autonomously and accelerated towards the portal on the top of the city. At such an old age, don't play with your life all day long. On the top floor of the Stark Industries headquarters building below, Shinyen kept his right hand in a virtual grasping motion, and the green magnetic energy on his palm flowed freely. Under the control and guidance of the powerful magnetic force, the nuclear bomb sank into the portal and disappeared. Shinyen no longer hesitated, and continued to control the nearby gem scepter to penetrate deeply, forcibly piercing the energy protection shield of the cosmic cube. The Black Widow on the side exclaimed, and saw that the energy condensed on the Rubik's Cube was like a waterfall flowing backwards, and finally burst upwards. The blue light column disappeared, and the portal in the sky also collapsed and could not be maintained. Bang, bang, bang. I don't know whether the nuclear bomb rushed into the portal and destroyed the alien base over there, or whether it caused the portal connecting the Earth and another part of the universe to disappear and disintegrate. Inside the city of New York, the alien army troops that were still wreaking havoc in the city, alien robots, crawling mechanical bodies, including large alien warships, suddenly lost their intelligence and power and fell to the ground, becoming countless scraps of copper and iron. In an instant, the alien army that invaded New York was completely destroyed. This will also represent the second alien invasion in modern human history. The Grand Battle of the Earth against aliens, which was later called the Battle of New York, has come to an end. It should be said that it came suddenly, and it disappeared suddenly. In the air, Iron Man was stunned for a moment, and then reacted extremely quickly, and hurriedly shouted, "Jarvis, quickly hang up the phone call to Pepper. Shit, I almost recorded another will." On the ground, the Hulk violently broke through a building and rushed out. He looked at the alien mechanical bodies lying all over the ground in confusion, and continued to trample on them with some reluctance. On the other side of the street, Thor reached out and pulled up Captain America on the ground. Looking at the serious injury caused by the laser on his lower abdomen, he couldn't help asking, "Are you okay?" "Of course I'm fine. I can still fight like this all day." Captain America twitched his mouth in pain, and still answered confidently. On the top floor of Stark Building, Black Widow looked to the side and was stunned. It was the mysterious boss who had just stood next to him. He had disappeared long ago. Along with him, there were also the Gem Scepter and the Cosmic Cube. Far away from the central battle in the city, in the shopping mall where the students had been before. It was a mess here, full of potholes, and many alien mechanical bodies fell to the ground. A silver stream of light flashed, and Shinen appeared here holding Spider-Man, and the two entered the dressing room of the previous clothing store. "Close the door." Shinen gestured to Spider-Man. "Lend me your backpack." Spider-Man took off her spider hood, and her sweat-soaked blonde hair fell, revealing the beautiful and fair face of a girl. Gwen took out clothes from her backpack and handed the empty backpack to Shinen. Shinen opened the backpack and put two small objects held by metal spider silk into it. They were a sphere and a cube, both with a layer of metal coating on the surface. Aren't they the Gem Scepter and the Cosmic Cube? Shinen felt that these two mysterious items were too dangerous, so he didn't choose to leave them where they were. The Cosmic Cube was okay, just a layer of metal coating would do. Since the Gem Scepter was a bit conspicuous and difficult to carry, Shinen directly twisted the metal of the scepter into a sphere, wrapped the yellow gem inside, and then added an extra layer of metal coating on the sphere. The gray-silver ordinary metal coating, plus the seemingly hollow weight, made these two objects look like inconspicuous decorations. This is also the effect Shinen wants to achieve. After this, it is time to change clothes. Shinen has to peel off the metal spider suit from his body, and Gwen has to change the almost soaked spider suit back into the previous skirt. The dressing room is narrow. Shinen peeled off the metal spider silk on his body with his back to Gwen, and could feel a smooth and flexible body behind him from time to time, and the body parts would touch his lower back from time to time. It would be fine if it was normal. Just now, Shinen has a super spider sense. Any keen sense of touch can be magnified 10 times, and he subconsciously wants to explore the things behind him. With just a slight movement of his peripheral vision to the side, he could see a very graceful curve on his back. His eyes couldn't help but follow the soft and white neck, sliding down to the lunar groove that was like a hormonal abyss. No, this won't work. For the sake of brothers, hold on. Shinen took a deep breath and forced himself to stare straight ahead. As a result, he inhaled a faint fragrance. It's Gwen's breath. But, does it usually smell this good? Shinen suddenly felt that his body was a little hot, as if the instinct of the super spider gene was at work. It's heaven and it's hell. Suffered it for 2 minutes. Shinen peeled off the last strand of metal spider silk from the body surface, and finally the voice of Spider-Man came from behind. "I've changed it." "Yeah, it's over." Shinen relaxed and turned around, but was thrown to the floor of the single room by the girl. Facing Gwen, Shinen did not use his abilities. What caught my eye was naturally Gwen, who had changed back into a normal dress, but there was something not quite right about her condition at the moment. Gwen almost straddled Shinen, placing her hands slightly forward on his chest. Her golden hair, which was wet with sweat, was slightly stuck to her face. The girl's cheeks were flushed, her jewel-like beautiful eyes were a little blurry at this time, beads of sweat appeared on her high nose, and her open mouth was still breathing out heat. The usually intellectual Ujiha girl is now very lustful. I can't help it anymore. Gwen bit her lower lip and said a little aggrievedly. Gwen, you. Shinen was about to say something, but his open mouth was blocked by the girl who leaned down. Hey, he was forcefully kissed again. Shinion's mind went blank. Only one thought came to his mind. This is the second time today. Bangta. The sound of slight footsteps sounded quietly in the messy shopping mall. Instructor Lot swallowed dryly, and couldn't help but trembled his hands to tighten the grip of the alien firearm again. He glanced at the alien robot lying on the ground and lost all functions, then carefully walked around it, and nervously and cautiously explored the upper floors of the mall. Arrive at the 4th floor of the mall. On the outer walls of the building here, there are still the tragic holes left after the alien bombardment just now. It is like a dangerous building, with signs of continuing to collapse at any time. Various products were scattered on the floor of the corridor inside the building, as well as shoes, hats, backpacks and other items that guests had lost when they fled in panic. Instructor Lot walked slowly against the wall, paying attention to his feet while keeping the alien gun in his hand, ready to compete with the invading aliens at any time. Just like that, I was about to pass by a clothing store. Instructor Lot's hand holding the gun shook again, but he suddenly heard a slight movement from the store. To be precise, it was a single dressing room in the store. Who is inside? Instructor Lot raised his gun and approached the dressing room. As he approached the door, he could hear the sounds of moving animals inside. Instructor Lot hesitated for a moment, then raised his right foot and kicked hard towards the door. As a result, before Instructor Lot's foot even kicked on the door panel of the single room, the door opened from the inside out. Let him fall forward into the dressing room inside. At the same time, there were two agile figures in the dressing room, one on the left and one on the right, just avoiding Instructor Lot, who fell into the dressing room. Teacher Instructor. Instructor Lot. The gun in his hand was thrown away. Instructor Lot was stricken by the fall and more frightened. His face turned pale for a while, thinking that he was dead. Never thought about it. Following two familiar voices, Instructor Lot was helped up by the two people next to him. Why are you here? Instructor Lot opened his eyes in surprise, staring blankly at the boys and girls standing on the left and right. It was not Gwen, the monitor of the students in his class, and the one who suddenly disappeared in the outer city. Are your students happy? Shinen said with a normal expression. I was worried about classmate Gwen, so I secretly came back here just now, and found her here, so we hid in here together. Yes, Instructor, we were both frightened. Gwen's beautiful eyes flashed with misty water, and she said weakly while wiping the corners of her lips without leaving any trace. Well, it's nothing, just that the pink lips are a little red and swollen. The girl secretly glared at Shinen. Shinen was a little helpless. Can you blame him? Who started it just now? Naturally, Instructor Lot didn't pay any attention. He looked at Gwen and Shinen nearby, and thought he was patting his shoulder in a dream. After confirming that the current situation was a real reality, such a tall man suddenly covered his forehead and cried out. Shinen and Gwen were both dumbfounded. Instructor, teacher, are you okay? Gwen asked hurriedly. I'm fine, I'm just so happy. Instructor Lot sobbed. I just returned to the urban war zone here, and in another place, I found the 3 remaining classmates who were separated, and we hid together. In the underground parking lot, I evaded the alien's search until there was no movement outside, and I rushed over here to look for him. Fortunately, both of you have been found. In this way, all the classmates in our class will be the same. Before leaving school, as the instructor, I said that I will be responsible for your safety. So no matter what happens, since I brought you to New York, I must bring you back intact. Now, I did it. Instructor Lot cried and laughed, venting his fears while feeling excited that the students were all safe. Shinen and Gwen looked at each other and saw that all the students were fine. This should be the most fortunate thing today. Shinen looked at Instructor Lot and sighed sincerely. Instructor, you are the real hero. As night approaches, the setting sun sets over the modern post-war urban areas of New York. The power in the city has been restored urgently, and neon lights are ringing all over the streets. However, the once bustling and lively streets are now reduced to smoke-filled ruins. New York citizens who were previously forced to evacuate outside the city are now gradually withdrawing part of them, and most of them are ordinary civilians at the grassroots level. After all, the rich man has second or third residences elsewhere, and it is obvious that he will not return to New York for the time being. Fortunately, the alien war is over and the city will be able to regain its vitality sooner or later. Shinen, Gwen, and instructor Lot met with the students led by the deputy instructor on the outskirts of the city. The wailing sounds continued, and red lights flashed everywhere. Military and police helicopters flew into the city one after another, and large-scale modern troops entered the city to block the central urban battle situation and deal with the follow-up matters of the Battle of New York. In the outer city, there were many armed police officers to maintain order, and a large number of temporary rescue stations were set up to rescue the wounded and clean up the dead. Either hugging relatives happily and reunited, or crying in front of the remains of relatives, such things are happening everywhere in the outer city. Shinyen's mind moved, and he lowered his voice to Gwen beside him and said, "Help me deal with the instructor, I want to go somewhere and take a look, and I will be back soon." "Okay, be careful." Gwen nodded softly. Shinyen secretly left the student team and merged into the chaotic crowd. Quickly came to a place in the city. This place is a disaster area severely bombarded by alien forces. Many houses and buildings are mostly destroyed, and only a few streetlights that survived on the roadside are on. However, Shinyen saw it at a glance when he came here. In a dimly lit building ruins, several rescuers in protective clothing were packing two bodies in white body bags. Next to the ruins, a red-haired girl was standing there quietly, looking a little helpless. Shinyen walked forward without hesitation and hugged the body that seemed to be cold from behind. "Wanda, cry if you want to." The red-haired girl was still enduring, but now she seemed to have finally found someone to rely on, and turned to throw herself into the boy's arms and burst into tears. "Mom and Dad are gone. My brother is gone too. I have no family." Wanda's doll-like face was full of tears, and she sobbed pitifully. "That's not the case." Shinyen rubbed Wanda's red hair, thinking of the domineering green-haired Loli, and said with certainty, "You still have your family to protect you, and Pete must be fine." Shinyen hugged the girl, paused, and said sincerely, "If possible, you can also treat me as a family member in the future." "Really?" Wanda raised her eyes, opened her red eyes wide, and reflected Shinyen's face. "Of course." Shinyen put his hand on Wanda's head and said with some pity. Wanda nodded and finally stopped crying. At this moment, she seemed to be aware of something and looked towards one side of the city inexplicably. "What's wrong?" Shinyen looked in the direction of her gaze, and could only see the red night sky at the end of the city. But the next moment, his ice-blue pupils suddenly shrank. "Someone is wailing. In fact, this is normal. After all, the whole city has just been hit by alien forces, and there are wailing everywhere." However, the wailing of the man that Shinyen heard at this time did not come from the street where he was, or even from the city of New York where he was. Rather, it was outside the city, at the end of the night sky. This wailing has the characteristics of ultrasound, and ordinary people can't hear it clearly, but people with extraordinary physiques can obviously capture it keenly. This is a wailing that spreads all over the world. When Shinyen rushed back to the urban area where the instructor and students were, he found that almost all the people there looked at the huge advertising screen of a building with surprised faces. A broadcast report was being played on the huge advertising screen. It was a real-time broadcast report from Gotham City, with the camera looking down from a helicopter. Through clear live footage, you can see that mournful sirens were ringing throughout the city, and the sky and the earth were burning. The site of the abandoned factory turned into a wasteland, and the entire ground in the fighting area collapsed 5 meters. The fragmented reinforced concrete buildings are like urban areas ravaged by natural disasters, making people feel as if they are inside and smell the strong smell of gunpowder floating in the air. Everything shows that while an alien invasion is taking place in New York City, a brutal battle beyond human imagination is also taking place in Gotham City. In the center of the battlefield, there is a tall man in a black bat-style armor, a beautiful woman holding a golden sword and a round shield, and a woman wearing an ordinary shirt and uniform dressed as a reporter. Shinyen's face was solemn, and his aunt actually participated in another war today. The footage of the shooting scene is zoomed in the frame of the news report. A tall man wearing a red cape faced off against a ferocious monster. The monster was bigger than the abominations that Shinyen had seen before. It was ugly, ferocious, and terrifying, and its whole body was covered with highly dense muscle lumps. As for the tall man in the red cloak, everyone on Earth knows who that is without any news explanation. Superman. It's just that Superman, who has always been invincible, carrying a Boeing in his hand and crushing mountains, is now entangled in a close relationship with that terrifying monster. The flashing green spear in Superman's hand penetrated the body of the indescribable monster, but his own chest was also penetrated by the monster's sharp and shiny claws. Superman and the monster died together, like an ancient and taboo sculpture, standing motionless on the ruins. Tick-tock. Scarlet blood flows from Superman's perfect and strong body. Many people at the scene and even around the world watching the news reports exclaimed for no reason, "It turns out that God can bleed, too, and it's red." Superman opened his mouth in pain, and his wailing sound was like an actual sound wave, impacting outward. Soon, he and the terrifying monster entangled together, their bodies tilted slightly, and they both fell in the center of the ruins of the battlefield. Superman was lying on the ground paved with iron and blood, and above him was the scorching red night sky that had experienced a nuclear explosion. On January 2, 2012, at 9 o'clock in the evening, Superman died in battle. Everyone at the scene, including those watching the news reports, fell silent watching this scene. Superman died in battle. Is it true? Countless people couldn't believe it. But no matter what, this is true. Today, after the events of the Battle of New York and the death of Superman that happened at the same time, mankind has gained insight into a cruel and numbing truth. There are terrifying alien forces outside the Earth, and there are even people on the Earth who can kill the unknown existence of Superman. Fear, trembling, panic. Things that were originally hidden behind the world are completely revealed. Just like returning to the primitive stage before humans took over the Earth, a new era begins today. New York, S.H.I.E.L.D. Headquarters Building, Conference Room. The man in a suit with a bald head and elegant glasses slapped the table hard and couldn't help shouting, "What's going on?" Not only Loki's Mind Scepter, but also our original cosmic cube of S.H.I.E.L.D. is missing. You Avengers must take full responsibility. Faced with his question, on the conference table, Stark, who had taken off his iron suit, fiddled with the water glass absent-mindedly. Dr. Banner, who had recovered from the Hulk state, yawned. Captain America, Steve Rogers, took off his helmet without saying a word. Two S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, Black Widow Natasha Romanoff, and Hawkeye Clint Barton, who had been secretly killing aliens somewhere, followed the boss and pretended not to hear the question. "Can you get me a glass of water? By the way, who are you?" Stark gestured to the water glass in his hand, and then glanced at the man in front of him. The bald man's eyes twitched, and he couldn't hide his anger and said, "I am Agent Sidwell of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. I have been given the highest level instructions from S.H.I.E.L.D. and have the authority to handle all follow-up matters of the Battle of New York." "Really? Then where were you when we were fighting just now?" Stark shrugged. "Watch your attitude." Before Agent Sidwell could finish his words, Dr. Banner suddenly twitched and looked like he was about to become angry and turn green. This frightened him and the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent standing behind him and subconsciously took a few steps back. Unexpectedly, Dr. Banner just made a feint, spread his hands and said, "Don't pay attention to me, you continue." "Why don't you care? You are a time bomb." Agent Sidwell was about to say something. At this time, the door of the conference room opened, and a one-eyed black man dressed in black walked in, followed by a tall female agent assistant. "Agent Sidwell, please get out first," the one-eyed black man said. "Yes, Director." Agent Sidwell waved helplessly and left the conference room with the special team. Before leaving, he said, "Director, you have to understand that I don't really want to take care of it. It's just that at the top level, it's hard for me to explain to the congressman." Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D., had no expression on his face. When the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents left, only the Avengers were left in the conference room. "Where's Thor?" Director Nick asked calmly with his hand on the table. Stark quickly replied. "He returned to God's realm, saying he was dealing with his brother Loki's matter. Loki is a war criminal, and they must give him due sanctions." Director Nick narrowed his one eye seriously and glanced at the heroes on the field. "I believe you all know that Superman was killed not long ago. We are here. This battle in New York has suffered heavy losses, but it cannot be considered a complete victory. In the future, there will be countless dangers waiting for you, the Avengers." Director Nick paused and asked, "What do you want to say?" "Armor, weapons." Stark spoke immediately and said in a deep voice, We need to arm the whole world with armor. Tony. Captain America frowned and retorted, your idea is too extreme. Extreme? I don't think so. Stark shook his head. Let's not discuss whether the whole world needs to be armed with armor. Anyway, armored weapons need to be improved, and our current equipment is not powerful enough. Dr. Banner joined the discussion. For example, you can use me as a prototype to make a Hulkbuster armor. Firstly, it can restrain me from losing control, and secondly, it can be used as heavyweight armor in future battlefields. Banner, you still understand me? Stark's eyes lit up, and he was obviously moved by Banner's proposal. Not only Hulkbuster, we need more types of anti-armor weapons. Where are you two? Why don't you say something? Director Nick looked at Black Widow and Hawkeye, who were sitting silently aside. Hawkeye rubbed the back of his head and said casually, we need more superhero members. Well, a very boring nonsense. Naturally, the more superheroes the better, but where do so many superheroes come from? I've been thinking about a question. Black Widow suddenly said. Today, who is the mysterious person who joined the battle to help us? This question, every member of the Avengers fell silent. They also want to know the powerful being who single-handedly quickly reversed the Battle of New York. Who is it? The day after the Battle of New York and death of Superman. The 2 instructors and 32 students in Shinen's class all took the school bus transferred from Washington and returned to school. At noon, when the school bus arrived at the school gate, you can see that the gate was already full of parents waiting. Many students got off the bus and reunited with their families, and immediately cried out, wow, and the scene was suddenly filled with tears. I have to say that this time it was really a life or death experience. After all, as of now, the number of people who died in the Battle of New York has reached tens of thousands, and countless people are missing. It is a miracle that the classmates in the class were on the edge of the central battle at the time of the incident, and they all returned to school without missing a single person. Many local reporters have rushed to the school to interview, but fortunately they were intercepted by school staff. Thank you for your hard work. Instructor Roth, Instructor Baker. The principal and teachers of the school rushed to the door and warmly welcomed the 2 instructors to get off the car. It's not hard, this is my duty as an instructor. Instructor Roth laughed heartily, without showing any fear. His glorious and majestic image made many female teachers and parents applaud. Shinen and Gwen looked at each other and smiled knowingly. He also silently concealed the fact that the instructor cried in the mall. Deputy Instructor Quentin Baker was in a trance, thinking about something, and went into the school office building alone. The principal announced loudly, students, you are frightened. You can go home with your family now, and come back to class after a day of rest. Suddenly, the parents dispersed with their students. Shinen and Gwen separated in the car. After all, they saw their families. Gwen waved and walked towards a police car parked not far from the road. Shinen carried Gwen's backpack and walked towards a road sign across the road. In the most conspicuous place, a black-haired woman was leaning there waiting. Aunt, Shinen came to the woman and saw her worried face. He had a lot to say. Diana obviously knew what Shinen was thinking. She first put her hand on Shinen's head. You did a good job. Then, she gently held his palm and said softly, let's go home first. Meow. At the same time, an orange-yellow little beast figure poked its head out of Diana's windbreaker pocket. Shinen smiled. He fiddled with the little emperor's soft jaw with his fingers, took it out and put it in his arms, nodded and said, okay, let's go home together. Home, main hall. Shinen hugged the slender waist made by God with perfect proportions, and rested his head on the soft and warm armpits. He held the Yuan Devourer cub with excellent hair texture in his arms. He sat on the sofa in the hall with Aunt Diana, and the silver bracelets they wore on their hands made a pair. No secrets. Shinen told what he encountered in the battle in New York this time, and Diana also told what she encountered in Gotham City. It seems to be just an ordinary and harmonious family communication, but every word is the core information of the 2 major events. Superman was actually questioned by the citizens of Metropolis to that extent. His original intention was just to save mankind, but he was interrogated for destroying buildings and accidentally injuring humans. The fight between the 2 superheroes Batman and Superman. The ultimate monster, Doomsday, from Krypton. When Shinen heard the story of his aunt, he suddenly remembered a sentence he learned in his previous life. Those who carry firewood for the public should not be frozen to death in the wind and snow. Was Superman really killed by the Doomsday Monster? Maybe, but for him, human doubts and slanders are definitely sharper and more painful than the claws piercing his chest. Diana was also surprised when she heard about Shinyen's trip to New York. Compared with her only participating in the war in Gotham City halfway, Shinyen can be said to have directly reversed the situation of the New York War. Does the girl Gwen Stacy from the next neighborhood have the ability of a super spider with mutation? And the girl who has the ability of magnetism, Lorna? Diana's beautiful eyes lit up. She always thought from the perspective of Shinyen. Now she thought that even if she was not around, someone would be able to ensure that Shinyen would be given a buff. Then what do you want to do with the two things you got? Diana looked at Shinyen curiously. Simple. Shinyen picked up Gwen's backpack from the sofa next to him. He unzipped it and took out a set of black and white female spider uniforms from it. Well, I took the wrong one. Under the calm eyes of Aunt Diana. Shinyen's mouth twitched, and he quickly put Gwen's uniform back and took out the metal sphere and metal cube hidden inside. Gem scepter, cosmic cube. Little Emperor, help me eat something, Shinyen said, pinching the mouth of the orange kitten in his arms. The little Emperor did not open his eyes and continued to doze comfortably, but still opened his cat's mouth. It was only a small mouth that was less than half the size of a fist, but Shinyen stuffed the palm-sized metal ball into it and it went in very easily. He continued to stuff the cosmic cube into the microcosm exclusive to the devouring beast. Shinyen blinked. That's it. Not to mention that only the little Emperor can open the devouring beast space. As long as no one knows the whereabouts of these two things, even if the little Emperor sees them, he will not be able to detect them. It can be said that this should be the safest safe on Earth. Aunt, I have something to discuss with you. Shinyen hesitated and said. Result. Diana seemed to know what was on his mind and smiled slightly. You want to help the girl named Wanda, right? Yes, Shinyen said bluntly. She just lost her parents, and her brother was taken away. I am not very comfortable with her staying alone in New York. This is actually very simple. Diana pondered for a moment and said, I can arrange for the girl to transfer to a private school in Washington, let her live nearby, and bear the living expenses. Shinyen suddenly asked curiously, Aunt, how much money do we have in our family? In his impression, before knowing Aunt Diana's identity as a demigod, his family was a well-off family. There were no luxury items at home, but they were also the type that had everything. At least the clothes they wore were all branded. Diana tilted her head and thought, I haven't taken a careful inventory. I bought a lot of antiques in the past. Now my assets should be around $1 billion US. How much? $1 billion US. Shinyen opened his eyes wide. This is not a few million or tens of millions, but several $100 million US. Diana whispered, It's nothing. I have been working for 80 years. At first, I repaired cultural relics in the Louvre. Later, after World War II, I invested in some finance. Due to my identity, I changed jobs in different industries such as archaeology, computer, and law. Money is just a string of numbers for her. No matter how much or how little, it doesn't matter. It's enough. As for work, it's just to integrate into the human world. Listen, what kind of Versailles speech is this? Shinyen looked at the perfect and beautiful aunt nearby and couldn't help saying, Rich woman, I don't want to work hard anymore. What are you talking about? Facing the suddenly serious Shinyen, Diana touched his eyebrows with her warm and smooth fingers. Although my money is yours, I still hope that you can make some money through your own efforts in the future. After all, working is a good social experience. Okay, Shinyen responded feebly, and his wish to lie down was shattered. I can bear all the expenses of that girl until she reaches adulthood, but is this what she wants to see? Diana looked at Shinyen and said meaningfully, Have you ever considered that is she personally willing to accept everything that is planned for her? Quote. This. Shinyen paused. Really? Just by looking at the quiet way Wanda stood alone next to her parents' bodies that day, neither crying nor fussing, we knew that she was an independent and strong girl. Shinyen blindly wanted to protect Wanda by his side and provide her with accommodation and living expenses, but he didn't know what the girl really wanted. What should I do, Aunt? Shinen raised his eyes and seriously asked Diana for her opinion. Diana thought for a while and said softly, "I'll make the arrangements." That night, New York is in a relatively quiet five-star hotel in the outer city that was restored after the war. Little Wanda was led by the front desk waiter to a table by the window on the second floor. Before she even got close to her seat, Wanda saw someone sitting on the seat waiting for her from a distance of more than 10 meters. Her eyes couldn't help but ripples, and she couldn't help but admire in her heart. What a beautiful person. The female celebrities and models on TV are nothing more than that. "Are you little Wanda?" Diana looked at Wanda, who was approaching, and said warmly, "Sit down and talk." She was wearing a beige long windbreaker, which could not hide her curvy and mature body curves. Wanda sat down on the seat opposite Diana. Although her figure was far less good than Diana's, her face was as delicate and fair as a doll's, and her eyebrows already had the appearance of a beautiful woman. And that long crimson hair that seemed to be born with her gave Diana a look of surprise. "Excuse me, who are you?" Wanda looked at Diana curiously. "My name is Diana Prince." Diana introduced herself. "Prince?" Wanda opened her eyes in surprise. Diana nodded lightly and said with a smile, "Yes, I am a member of Shinen's family." "Hello, my name is Wanda, Wanda Django Maximov." When she heard that it was Shinen's family, Wanda was not so cautious and her attitude became much more respectful. "Shinen has already told me about your general situation." Diana held her chin slightly with her palm and stared at the red-haired girl in front of her. "What he means is that he wants to help you transfer to a private school in Washington, nearby. Arrange your accommodation. Of course, I will also arrange for someone to help find your brother." "No, it doesn't have to be so troublesome." Wanda shook her head hurriedly and waved her hands in a panic. "Shinen helped my brother and saved my life. I am already very grateful to him. I can't repay him now." "Don't refuse in a hurry." Diana asked, "I want to know, what do you think of Shinen's proposal?" "Very good. But, it's great." Wanda lowered her head and whispered, "I really can't accept it for him to pay so much for nothing." Wanda paused and asked with red eyes, "If possible, I hope you can arrange for someone to find my brother. It doesn't matter to me personally." What a nice girl, Diana thought to herself, suddenly admiring Shinen's vision, and continued to ask, "Then you don't want to go to school?" With the current situation here in New York, it is estimated that classes will be suspended for a long time, and in Washington, you can still see it off in Shinen. Wanda lowered her head and thought for a moment, then said, "Nah, I have no money now. But I will work part-time. When I stabilize my situation in the future, I will definitely go to Washington." Diana said very simply, "You are only 13 years old now. Who will recruit you to work? If you continue like this, you will probably be placed in an orphanage. Not to mention being controlled by others, you may not have the chance to work again in the future." Looking for brother. Wanda clenched her hands under the table and stayed in her seat at a loss. Only 13 years old, lost his family, house and property. A person is living alone in post-war New York City, and is still looking for his brother who was abducted by mysterious forces. There are too many tests to face in the future. I have a plan here. Diana looked at the helpless Wanda and suddenly said, "A job that not only allows you to live and study in Washington, but also allows you to repay the various help provided by Shinen. You can even use it as a long-term job. Internship work." Wanda opened her cute eyes wide and asked with a hint of hope, "What plan?" The next day, morning. The curtains in the single room were tightly drawn, not letting in a single ray of morning light. Shinen was still sleeping under the covers when he suddenly dreamed of a blue-haired Lolita maid calling from his bedside, "Master, it's time to get up. Sleep a little longer." Shinen muttered in confusion. "Don't sleep anymore, it's time to get up and get ready for breakfast." A soft, familiar childish voice continued to come from close to the ear, and there was a slight tug on one side of the quilt. Wait, is this dream a bit too real? Also, this voice is... Shinen opened his eyes as if awakened, and what came into view was a scarlet maid with a slightly larger apron hanging on her chest. No, something is wrong. Shinen patted his cheeks, looked at the red-haired girl who was still pinching a corner of the quilt with her little hands, and said in doubt, "Wanda, why are you here? Why can't I be here?" Seeing Shinen who had rescued her again, Wanda suppressed her inner joy. went to the window, stood on tiptoe and opened the curtains, letting the morning light outside shine into the room. Miss Diana gave me a job for internship for 3 years until I become an adult. I can get part of the salary in advance and live here. What job? Shinen asked curiously, but Aunt Diana didn't tell him. Take care of you, Master Shinen. For example, wake you up in the morning, make breakfast, clean the house, wash clothes, and meet your daily needs. Wanda counted on her fingers. Before she finished speaking, Shinen interrupted her. Wait. Isn't this a maid? Shinen's original intention was to let Wanda come to Washington so that he could take care of her. As a result, now it is Wanda who comes to take care of herself. Why do I need someone to take care of me, especially someone younger than me? Shinen was stunned for a moment, but soon understood. This is probably a compromise plan made by Aunt Diana to make Wanda feel at ease to accept her financial help. Don't you need it? Looking at Wanda's depressed face, Shinen immediately gave up and said quickly, yes, I need it very much. I can't take care of myself at all in my daily life. Well, it seems a bit exaggerated. Shinen continued, just don't call me master, I'm not used to people calling me that. Then, Scarlet made Wanda blushed, hesitated, and finally asked softly, what do you want for breakfast? Master. Shinen is gone. Shinen sat at the dining table eating warm milk and bread. He watched the follow-up news about the New York War and Superman's death while watching a small crimson figure busying around in the living room. Aunt Diana went out to work early, leaving only Shinen and the crimson maid Wanda at home. The red-haired girl tied her waist-length hair into 2 ponytails, wearing a slightly larger apron, and wiped the furniture at home with a wet rag. Although her movements were a little unskilled, she was extremely meticulous and careful, cleaning every corner several times. Looking at little Wanda standing on tiptoe many times, raising her hands and wiping with great effort, Shinen suddenly felt guilty for recruiting child laborers, and said reluctantly, well, take a break first, the house is not very dirty. That won't do. Wanda worked hard and panted. I will report to the school here tomorrow. According to what Miss Diana said, it is best to clean the house thoroughly today, and also understand the future working environment. Shinen asked curiously, while studying every day, you have to come to work before and after school. Can you handle it? I have no problem. In the past, I often did housework at home. Wanda seemed to be cheering herself up, with a firm look in her eyes. At this time, Wanda suddenly seemed to think of something, put the rag in her hand into the bucket, turned around and looked at Shinen who was enjoying breakfast, and asked the service feedback seriously, Master, how is the temperature of my milk? Shinen, who was looking up to drink a mouthful of warm milk, almost choked to death on the chair. He coughed violently a few times, and a lot of white milk spilled on the back of his hand. Master, are you okay? Wanda hurried forward and patted Shinen's back with her little hand. She looked at the milk spilled on the back of Shinen's hand, without much hesitation, gently leaned forward, and drank it all with a slurp. Don't waste it. Wanda licked the remaining milk stains on the corner of her lips and whispered softly. Shinen was gone again. He said weakly, Wanda, remember. It's okay if you call me at home, but don't call me like this outside. Why? Wanda tilted her crimson ponytails and asked innocently. Because I don't want to be taken away by the police, uncle. Shinen said. Especially Officer George from Gwen's house, who had been keeping a close eye on him. If he found out that he had recruited a maid, the consequences would be disastrous. Okay. Wanda seemed to have realized that the previous action was too intimate, and said with a slightly red cheek, then I will call you Master at home and Master Shinen outside. No problem. Shinen nodded. He didn't say much, but quickly finished all the breakfast on the table. Wanda secretly observed this and showed a happy smile on her face. Let Wanda clean up the tableware and take it into the kitchen. Shinen pondered and said, Wanda, you don't have to make my lunch at noon. Be careful at home. While Shinen was speaking, he glanced at the little orange cat sleeping soundly under the table next to his feet, and whispered, Xiao Huang, protect Wanda at home. Xiao Huang didn't open his eyes, but his tail shook abruptly. Is the master going out? Wanda poked her head out of the kitchen and asked curiously. Shinen was choked again, still not used to this special name, took a breath and said, Yes, I'm going to see a friend. Be careful on the road, I'll wait for you at home. Wanda's voice was still faintly in his ears. Shinen glanced at the back of his right hand. Wanda's unintentional action just now obviously indirectly triggered the Lord of the Dependents. Shinen could clearly feel that his physique and strength had obviously increased a little, but it was still within the scope of humans. Sure enough, Wanda is just an ordinary girl. Shinen muttered to himself, and a figure with dark green hair appeared in his mind again. I don't know why that North Star Bosses has such a powerful and strange ability. Also, why Luna didn't recognize Wanda and took Wanda away on the day of the New York battle. Took 2 or 3 buses in the city and suburbs of Washington. Finally, Shinen sat on a dusty bus and came to the border area between Washington and New York. There are no high-rise buildings here, only endless fields and land. In the middle of the field, there was only one straight road, extending to the blue sky on both sides. Shinen got off at one of the stops far away. According to the address information provided by the school teacher, he finally came to a wooden house in the style of a Western villa. The 2-story wooden house was surrounded by wheat fields. Shinen didn't expect it to be so far. He looked down at the address again and confirmed that it was the place he was looking for. Then he rang the doorbell at the door. Very quickly, there was a sound of footsteps from inside the door, and an old woman in her 60s opened the door. Hello, excuse me, does Kara Danvers live here? Shinen asked first. Yes, who are you? The old woman nodded and looked at the boy in confusion. Shinen released the speech he had prepared long ago. My name is Shinen Prince, a member of the Student Union of Washington White High School. Since Kara Danvers in the class has been on leave, I came here on behalf of the teacher to understand the situation. Before the old woman could speak, an old male voice with a smoky voice came from inside the room. Let him come in. Shinen raised his eyes and found that he was a man of a certain age with his temples all white. Through the man's old and resolute face, you can vaguely see that he was quite handsome when he was young. The man introduced himself. My name is Stephen Danvers, and I am Kara's adoptive father. Living room on the first floor. Under the gaze and consideration of the old couple, Shinen sat stiffly on the sofa. He subconsciously glanced at the living room and found that there were many group photos on the wall, among which Kara's photos were the most numerous. Among them, there are 1 or 2 photos of young female airmen and modern fighter jets. Kara, do you have a sister? Shinen asked slightly curiously, also wanting to find a topic to break the somewhat tense atmosphere. Unexpectedly, after hearing this question, the old woman's eyes dimmed, and she got up and entered the kitchen as if to avoid it. At this moment, Shinen realized that he had said the wrong thing. After all, the female Air Force figure did not appear in the group photo of Kara's family, only personal photos from the old era. Don't mind. Stephen raised his cloudy eyes and looked at the photo on the wall and said, her name is Carol Danvers, and she is my first child. When I was young, I was very patriarchal, so much so that we had a quarrel with her very early. Sorry, Shinen apologized quickly. It's okay. Stephen waved his hand. It's all over. He recalled. After Carol ran away from home, she joined the Air Force despite our objections. Soon after, she died during a deployment. I kept her photo and hung it on the wall, which was also a form of repentance, to remind myself of the mistakes I made when I was young. Stephen looked at Shinen and said in a deep voice, so, we will never allow the last remaining child, Kara, to be harmed in any way. From this attitude, it can be seen that the adoptive parents love Carla very much, so it is not a family reason that Carla does not go to school. Shinen thought for a while and simply asked bluntly, Sir, I want to know why Kara didn't come to school. Is she sick? She is fine, but... Stephen paused and said to Shinen, aren't you her classmate? She is in her room upstairs. You can ask her in person now. Stephen warned. But remember, don't mention anything about Superman. Shinen came to the second floor of the wooden house alone. He looked at Kara's adoptive parents who were silent downstairs, and didn't know what to say for a moment. So, are parents now so careless? In any case, even if he was Kara's classmate, they dared to let him enter their 15-year-old daughter's room. Aren't you afraid that he will do something bad? Forget it, he didn't plan to do anything bad anyway. Cough. Shinen pretended to cough and knocked on a door on the second floor. Kara, are you in there? There was no movement in the room. Shinen continued to knock a few times, thinking that he was here, and said forcefully, "If you don't say anything, I will open the door directly." Inside, it was still quiet. Shinen tried to open the door and found that it was not locked, so he opened it directly. The wooden door was pushed open, and the girl's quiet and warm room was naturally inside. However, the only window in the room was closed, and the dark curtains were tightly drawn. There was no sunlight in the room, so the light in the room was very dim. Shinen walked a few steps into the room and soon accidentally stepped on a soft object. He picked it up and found that it was a pair of sky blue clothes with sparse fabric. Shinen shook his hand and shook the clothes in his hand out. Fortunately, no one saw this scene. Shinen was lucky and continued to look forward to the bed in the room. The quilt there was obviously bulging. The girl did not reveal any body parts. It seemed that she was hiding in the quilt on purpose. "Kara, you are in there, right?" Shinen called and came to the edge of the bed. "Senior, why are you here?" Finally, Kara's delayed response came from the quilt. "Since Christmas, you have been taking leave and have not come to school." So, before Shinen finished speaking, the girl asked directly, "Are you concerned about me?" "Of course." Shinen nodded firmly and asked back, "Aren't we friends?" The bulging quilt trembled slightly. Then, the girl cried out, "Senior, I don't know what to do. I feel useless. I can't help or protect him at all." Shinen suddenly understood when he heard this. In Contact, Kara's adoptive father just warned not to talk about Superman. Everything is right. Obviously, Kara is a loyal fan of Superman. Thinking of this, Shinen suddenly said, "Do you know what Superman was thinking about when he was dying?" Kara in the quilt was silent and asked, "What?" "He must be thinking that if there were a second or third Superman like him, it would be great." Shinen said in a deep voice, "In that case, he would not have to bear the safety of the whole world, and could even live a stable life like ordinary people. But no one can do better than him." Kara in the quilt responded with difficulty. "Yes, no one can do better than him. But that's why we have to work hard to become the Superman in his mind." Shinen pondered. "We ourselves have to become Superman, and let Superman become an ordinary person. This should be what he wants to see, and it can make him feel a relaxed and happy world." In fact, even Shinen didn't know what he was talking about. Shinen didn't say comforting words. At this time, all he could do was use Kara's idol to set a goal for Kara to work hard. As for becoming Superman, just kidding, who can become Superman? Superman is a Kryptonian. Shinen just mentioned it casually, thinking of arousing Kara's fighting spirit. "Senior, can I become Superman too?" Under the quilt, Kara's voice was no longer confused, and she asked softly. Shinen sat on the edge of the bed, patted the quilt covering Kara, and encouraged, "Of course, as long as you work hard, you will definitely become the female Superman that Da Chao expects in the future." Well, Shinen chose to continue to confuse the concept. "Work hard, I thought it was some bald guy, and I could become stronger by working hard." The bed was silent for a while. Just when Shinen thought that his words of comfort had no effect. "Liar." Kara suddenly burst into laughter, and said under the quilt, "I failed to confess my love, how can I become a Superman?" This, Shinen felt that he still couldn't keep up with the female's brain circuit. "Shinen, are you really not moved by me at all?" As the girl's words came, the two sides of the quilt in front of Shinen slid down slightly. Shinen was stunned. Even in the dim light of the room, he could still vaguely see a smooth and delicate white skin. Kara, whose hair was slightly dark gold in the dark, sat on the bed like a duck. She was only wearing a small suspender pajamas on her upper body and ultra-short pajamas that were less than knee length on her lower body. The narrow trousers made an attractive curve on her soft and smooth legs. The only remaining quilt covered one of her shoulders, and the quilt and suspenders on the other side had slipped down, revealing half of the girl's body from her shoulders. Kara's gem-like eyes sparkled, and she leaned forward with her hands on the bed, looking at Shinen at close range. Less than a few centimeters apart, their noses almost touched, and a subtle feeling of attraction between opposite genders arose spontaneously. Shinen opened his mouth, but was quickly sealed by a soft finger. "No need to say." Kara looked down at his left chest and smiled sweetly, "I already know the answer. But, I am not the real me now." Kara looked straight at Shinen, and said sincerely with confidence, give me a little more time, I will let you see my true attitude. Wait until then, and then you can consider my confession. Shinen left the Danvers family's residence. Before leaving the wooden house, he looked back at the window on the second floor, Kara's room, where the curtains had been opened and full of sunlight poured into the house. Today, Kara Danvers, who regained her confidence and vitality, left a very deep impression on Shinen. Shinen must admit that at that moment, his heart beat much faster than usual. SHIELD Headquarters, top floor office. Director, are you looking for me? Black Widow, wearing her usual black tight leather uniform, entered here. Nick Fury, the director of SHIELD, did not say much and silently placed a photo on his desk. Black Widow looked at the photo in surprise. Her usual targets were gang leaders or something, but this time the photo showed a teenager. A Chinese teenager. He looked like a high school student. His name is Shinen Prince. It has been preliminarily found that he is the adopted son of Wonder Woman, a member of the Justice League superhero. Nick Fury said quickly, I want you to approach him in disguise and find out if he has any extraordinary abilities. What if he has extraordinary abilities? Black Widow was a little curious. Nick Fury's single eye was deep, his dark face was firm and resolute, and he said in a deep voice. Rob the Justice League. Chapter 71. Washington, a wealthy residential area. A middle-aged woman in her 40s walked back to the residential area in high heels. Although she was wearing a pair of sunglasses and her slightly curly hair after cold perm texture treatment looked fashionable, her skin and figure still had traces of vicissitudes left by the years. Old lady in front, please make way. The white boy who was walking towards her shouted at her from a distance. The white boy was wearing top brand names from head to toe, and he was holding a black adult pit bull in his hand. The muscles and fangs of the pit bull were shocking. The boy might be used to being wild and arrogant on weekdays, and he didn't take pedestrians seriously in the corridor of the community. Under the fright of the fierce dog, many owners hurriedly avoided him. The woman in a leopard coat seemed not to hear it and continued to walk along the corridor. Tebby, bark at her. The white boy saw this and shouted angrily. At the command of its owner, the pit bull's eyes flashed with ferocious ferocity, and it was about to open its mouth and roar at the woman. However, the white boy was soon stunned again. The pit bull, which was originally aggressive, suddenly clamped its tail and crouched down. From its tightly closed mouth, it made an unprecedented, woo-woo, sound, and a pool of wetness spread on the ground where it was lying. It was as if it was scared to death. When the middle-aged woman approached, the pit bull seemed to have finally mustered up the courage, suddenly stood up and fled to the side in fear, dragging the boy holding the hand rope away. The whimpering of the vicious dog and the screaming of the boy rang in the sky above the community. The woman ignored the man and the dog throughout the whole process, and came to a private villa in the community with an indifferent expression. She opened the door and walked in. The next moment, when the door behind her closed automatically, the woman kicked off her high heels and tiptoed on the cold floor. She walked in the room in a strange and elegant cat-like manner, and her sunglasses, coat, and trousers fell off one by one, and she came to the bathroom of the villa with her wrinkled naked body. Barbara Minerva looked at the old woman reflected in the mirror, and suddenly reached out to pull hard on one side of her face, and a face full of dry wrinkles was pulled off, revealing a very young and cold face underneath. Not only that, the woman continued to grab the skin on her body and pulled it, and slightly horrified tore off a disguised human skin, revealing a graceful body without fat, agile and mature. From the appearance of an ordinary woman in her 40s or 50s, she turned on a woman in her 30s with the face and figure of a top model. Barbara Minerva had a blank expression on her face, turned on the shower head, and let the boiling hot water pour over her head. The hot steam was steaming, and there were 2 photos nailed on one wall of the bathroom. One of them was a photo of Wonder Woman during World War I. The other one was a handsome boy who was the age and dress of a high school student. Barbara showed a cruel sneer like a predator, and took off the second photo elegantly and quickly, licked it with her slightly long scarlet tongue, and the sharp fangs and claws of her mouth and hands were exposed coldly, and she tore the boy's photo into countless pieces in an instant. At night, around 8 o'clock, Shinen returned to his home. As soon as he opened the door, he saw the hall under the light, where the floor and furniture were wiped shiny. And on the sofa in the main hall, a beautiful and mature black-haired woman was sitting on it, with her slender legs elegantly leaning against each other, holding a law book and reading with her head down. Not far from her, a red-haired girl was lying on another small sofa. The girl had curled up on the sofa and fell asleep, holding a dry rag in her hand and a sleeping little orange cat in her arms. At first glance, it looks a bit like mother and daughter. This warm scene made Shinen dazed for a moment. Is there anything better in life than this? Diana put down the law book in her hand, walked forward lightly, took out the slippers from the shoe cabinet, and placed them on the carpet in front of Shinen. I originally asked Wanda to go to bed, but she insisted on waiting for you to come back. As a result, she lay on the sofa and teased Xiaohuang, and fell asleep in a short while. I guess she was exhausted. After all, too many things happened in the past few days. Shinen smiled, but he didn't think there was anything wrong with his aunt's arrangement. He now understood the intention of his aunt's arrangement, which not only allowed Wanda to get help with peace of mind, but also allowed Wanda to cheer up from the pain of losing her parents earlier. Thank you, Aunt. Looking at Diana in front of him, Shinen thanked sincerely. We are a family. Diana smiled slightly. Shinen looked at Wanda sleeping on the sofa and asked, where is Wanda's residence arranged? Diana bent down and put Shinyen's shoes into the shoe cabinet, and whispered, isn't there an empty storage room next to your room? I had someone bring in a batch of new furniture this afternoon, and it has been converted into a single bedroom. Wait a minute, so, Wanda will live with us in the future? Shinen was stunned. This so-called nearby accommodation is too close, right? Diana said as a matter of course, isn't this good? I have to deal with the Justice League and work now, so I rarely have time during the day, just so that little Wanda can take care of you. I'm not a child, why do I need to be taken care of? Shinen shook his head, and then asked curiously, how many people are there in the Justice League now? At present, there are only 2 of us, including me and Batman. Diana did not hide it from Shinen and said, after Superman's funeral tomorrow, Batman is going to leave for a small mountain village in the north. It is rumored that there is a superhuman named Aquaman there, who often fights pirates in the sea and takes fish to a small village that is difficult to enter and exit due to the heavy snow. There are 2 other candidates for members. One is Barry Allen, whom you met last time, and a superhuman whose body has been mechanically modified. I will contact them later and ask about their intentions. Quote. Shinen was listening carefully at first, but soon his attention was not focused. His eyes fell lightly on Aunt Diana. Aunt Diana's black hair was neatly tied up tonight, and she was wearing a white tube-top waist dress that showed off her figure. Her face and features were delicate as if carefully created by God. Her white and graceful neck like a white swan was visible at a glance, and a beautiful groove line was drawn on the perfectly shaped tube top. Does it start tonight? Looking at Diana in front of him, Shinen suddenly remembered something very important and couldn't help asking. Apparently knowing what Shinen was referring to, Diana nodded calmly. Shinen took a deep breath and took a step forward, holding the soft waist wrapped in a corset skirt in an S shape with both hands. Even though he touched it many times, he still secretly sighed that he was worthy of being a god. He raised his eyes and looked at the curve of the lips that were painted with light lipstick, which looked even more seductive. It's just practice. Shinen calmed down a little, and while Diana lowered her head in cooperation, he tiptoed slightly and kissed the softness that was exclusive to demigods. All said, Superman changed the world when he flew across the sky, and when Superman stopped flying, the world changed again. Morning on the 3rd day of Dakao's absence. Shinen woke up to the soft call of the Crimson Maid Wanda. He yawned and stood up, opened his ice-silver eyes filled with a sense of indifference, and subconsciously rubbed his long, fluffy silver hair. Master, what happened to your hair and eyes? Wanda looked at Shinen in surprise, her mouth slightly opened. It's nothing. From now on, I may become like this inexplicably every night, don't worry about it. Shinen blinked. When he dug out Wanda from the ruins with his bare hands, he had already demonstrated his extraordinary ability in front of her. Unexpectedly, Wanda stared closely at Shinen with long silver hair, her cute eyes glowing. It looks good. Shinen, forget it, don't argue with the little maid. Shinen came to the sink in the shower room. After washing his face, his long silver hair began to return to its original shape, and his silver eyes returned to the brown color of ordinary people. The duration of the demigod state is just right. Shi Young breathed out. The night before yesterday, besides discussing Wanda's settlement, he and Diana also discussed another matter. Now that times have changed, the backside of the world is beginning to be fully exposed to the sun, and there may be more supernatural events happening in the future. Although Aunt Diana can become a stable medium to supply the opposite gender, when Shinen obtained the Greek demigod physique, due to the autonomous overflow of divine power that could not be perfectly controlled, obvious features such as long silver hair and ice silver pupils would still appear. For the future, it allows Shinen to skillfully control divine power and perfectly hold the body of a demigod while maintaining the appearance of an ordinary human being. So, Diana proposed, practice every night. When Shinen directly triggers the Lord of the Families, his ability can be maintained for exactly 12 hours. As long as he triggers the demigod body after returning home every night, the ability will disappear before going to school during the day. Demigod by night, human by day. Practice more like this until Shinen can completely master the body of a demigod. Shinen changed into going out clothes and came out of the room. He happened to see Wanda, who was preparing breakfast. She also changed into a school uniform skirt. Her crimson hair was pressed down by the brim of her winter hat, which made her look very cute. Wanda, you look good in this school uniform. Shinen did not hesitate to praise him, because what Wanda needed most now was affirmation. Wanda's face turned slightly red, and she helped Shinen pull out the chair. She walked to another chair, jumped on it and sat down. Shinen glanced secretly. Well, little Wanda's feet were still hanging in the air and couldn't touch the floor when she sat in the chair. But even so, her feet didn't sway at all, and she was very calm and well behaved. Besides, Xiaohuang obviously knew that Wanda would prepare the food for him from now on, and he was walking back and forth affectionately next to Wanda. Shinen sat down on the chair and while enjoying breakfast, he asked curiously, Wanda, are you going to report to the school you are transferring to today? Wanda nodded and said, yes, Miss Diana has made all the arrangements. I just need to get my certificate and go report. By the way, Master, I have to go out on the weekend this week. Where to go? Gotham City. Oh, Gotham City, wait. Shinen opened his eyes wide. What are you doing in Gotham City? Wanda said truthfully. It was also arranged by Miss Diana. I can go there to learn about housekeeping and other knowledge. Miss Diana said that there is a very suitable teacher there, and someone will pick me up on the weekends. Quote. That is indeed a good teacher. However, it is too hard. The orderly look of the AFU housekeeper came to mind. Shinen thought for a while and said to Wanda, if you don't want to go, I can talk to my aunt. After all, you are only 13 years old. No, Wanda shook her head and said seriously, actually, this is what I asked Miss Diana last night. Now, I can only do housework casually. I need to learn more things before I can truly take good care of your master. Shinen stopped persuading. Wanda's current state of hard work and improvement is still very good, there is no need to dampen her enthusiasm. Well, since the maids are working so hard, the master shouldn't be lazy. Shinen is bright and energetic, igniting fighting spirit. I've had too many vacations recently, and a series of things have happened, so a lot of homework has been left behind. Nothing extraordinary or supernatural exists. From today on, you can be an ordinary high school student. Shinen thought secretly. In the morning, in class. Students, since your original deputy instructor, Quentin Baker, resigned and left the school the day before yesterday, the school has arranged for you to have another new instructor. Instructor, come out. Instructor Lot stood on the podium, explained to the students in the classroom, and shouted outside. Said at the same time. With her dark red short hair swaying, a female instructor wearing a white long-sleeved shirt, a black hip-hugging skirt, and shiny black stockings on her legs walked in from the classroom door. Hello, students. I am your new deputy instructor. My name is Natasha Romanov. Please give me more advice in the future. The female instructor said with a smile, pushing the black glasses on her nose. Both her appearance and figure are at the level of a top model. The students in the classroom were stunned for a moment, and Instructor Roth turned his head away without daring to look at her. The woman's body in front of her was so mature that water could be squeezed out. Gwen looked at Shinen not far away with some worry, and found that Shinyen's eyes twitched slightly. In the last New York battle, Gwen was not in the Stark Industries headquarters building, so she didn't know. But Shinen stopped the cosmic cube in the headquarters building, so she recognized it at a glance. Isn't the so-called new instructor the female agent in black? What the hell, are you still letting people learn? Shinen sighed in his heart, hoping that the other party was not coming for him. The other party should not recognize that he was the one who participated in the New York battle that day. In addition to the new instructor, there is also a new dean of teaching in the school. Instructor Roth seemed to have seen something, and hurried to the door of the classroom, and asked respectfully outside the corridor, "Dean of Teaching, do you want to go in and say a few words?" "No need." A cold and calm female voice sounded outside, and then a tall figure walked through the classroom corridor. The curly-haired woman was wearing a leopard print coat and a tight sweater inside, which still outlined her curvy curves. Even if she passed by, she still attracted the attention of many students in the class. Shinen blinked in confusion. When the dean of teaching passed by the corridor, did he seem to glance at him? The first period is a chemistry course. Shinen and his classmates all came to the school's independent laboratory and watched Dr. Kurt Connors, who was teaching, demonstrating experiments on the podium. Shinen also calmly held the utensils and started experiments with his classmates. Laboratory window. The cold and charming new instructor Natasha leaned against the window, her body wrapped in a teacher's uniform forming a graceful curve, observing many students while lowering her head to record files. The sun was shining and the breeze was blowing, making Natasha's dark red hair glow with an intoxicating and brilliant color. Immediately, many students dropped the glassware in their hands and clinked on the table. Shinen didn't pay much attention to the other party. If he cared too much, he would easily reveal his identity. Before you know why Natasha, a female agent who fights with the Avengers, suddenly came to his school disguised as a new instructor, it is best to treat her as a real new instructor. Natasha leaned against the window, her beautiful eyes scanning all the students in the laboratory, and, occasionally, her eyes fell on the black-haired boy in the corner of the back row of the laboratory. Before assuming her current identity, she had looked at the boy's photos repeatedly. Shinen Prince. The information on the surface shows that he is a quiet, calm boy who does not like to deal with strangers, but loves to study, respects his teachers and friends, and abides by the law. Maybe it is because he is of yellow race. Although he looks handsome, but he is not very popular in school, and he attracts much attention because of his childhood sweetheart Gwen Stacy. By the way, Gwen Stacy's father is also a local police officer with a certain reputation and status. And on the back, his guardian is Diana Prince, a member of the recently formed Justice League Heroes who is suspected to be a divine being. With Wonder Woman's recent frequent actions as a superhero, children living at home together shouldn't be completely unaware. This may be one of the reasons why director Nick Fury sent her down to investigate. Shinen Prince, who was raised by gods, is really just an ordinary human high school student. On the surface, Natasha was observing and recording the whole class. In fact, she only had eyes on the black-haired boy Shinen Prince. She began to analyze and make judgments based on her years of experience as a top spy. My first impression when I saw Shinen was good impression. After all, Shinen's appearance is pretty, her clothes are fashionable and good-looking, and her body is clean and full of sunshine. Wait a minute. Natasha suddenly froze and felt a sense of violation. Will you be someone who judges others by their appearance? She received espionage, weapons and military training in the Red Room at a very young age. She endured inhuman torture and training of her body and mind. She took drugs that were lethal enough to reach the limits of human beings. She killed countless enemies in countless ways, and even Companion, initially became the current top female agent Devil, Black Widow. A woman's beauty and body have long been the most advantageous and terrifying blade to achieve her goals. Not to mention judging people by their appearance, even if they read through the other person's intelligence files and even if the other person's advantages are what she thinks they are, Natasha will not have a good impression of a person at the first sight. But now, the first moment I saw Shinen, Natasha actually had a subtle favorable impression in her heart. If she hadn't been the Black Widow, and if the director hadn't specifically told her to observe it, she wouldn't have been able to notice this abnormal phenomenon. As a hypothetical, let's say Shinen Prince is my target. Not just for observation, the purpose of my coming to school this time is to assassinate him. Natasha closed her eyes for a moment and performed hypnotic suggestions to herself in her mind. When she opened her beautiful eyes again, they were as calm as a pool of stagnant water. This was the highly disguised look she would show every time she carried out an assassination. Black Widow Natasha looked at Shinen in the back row of the laboratory again. Then, in the next moment, the ice and dead water in her eyes were all broken, and a trace of unbearable flashed through her eyes that could not be concealed. Unable to gather the killing intent, Natasha was stunned. She was not a so-called righteous and kind person. But even though she hinted that Shinen was the enemy of this assassination, she still couldn't generate the slightest intention to kill the young Shinen even though she was already aware of the strange situation. Can't do it, can't do it, can't bear it. In fact, when the other party is in danger, he will probably take action to protect him. What's wrong with me? Natasha was stunned, and for a time she suspected that she was insane. Is there something wrong with the other party, or is there something wrong with her? Yes, perhaps, even Shinen himself did not notice this. In addition to the active ability of contacting the opposite gender and exchanging media to obtain abilities, the Lord of the Families also has a hidden passive ability. It can make strangers of the opposite who have extraordinary mastery generate a basic favorability value towards them. This favorability value is not too obvious to make the opponent fall to his knees on the spot, but before Shinen commits an act that makes him hate him, the opponent will absolutely not be able to become an enemy of Shinen with this basic favorability value. School, Dean's office. Taking off his leopard print coat and draping it on the office chair, the new dean crossed his legs and sat down on the chair. The brown tight sweater clearly outlined the muscle lines like a beautiful leopard. Catwoman Barbara's beautiful and charming face suddenly showed a happy and wonderful expression, and she subconsciously licked her reddened lips. Diana, I didn't expect that you actually hid such a good thing. You have cultivated it very well, and you don't share it with your good friends. Barbara seemed to have seen prey. Her beautiful eyes flashed with a flame-like dark green pupil, and her scarlet tongue with a watery glow licked her slender back of the hand wildly. I really want to see it earlier. What kind of expression will you show after I eat him thoroughly? After class, students walked out of the laboratory door in a line. The professor left, the students left, and the new instructor Natasha was also called away by Instructor Roth. Shinen was almost the last batch of people who had not left the laboratory. He was slowly packing up the glassware and watching Natasha leave with her round and beautiful buttocks wrapped in a uniform skirt. Gwen, who noticed this scene, was a little emotional and was about to walk out of the laboratory with a book in her arms, but was pulled back by Shinen the next moment. What? Gwen resisted a little, pouting in dissatisfaction. In a few years, I can grow up like that. It's too late to explain. Shinen pulled Gwen back to the empty laboratory. He looked up at the camera on the corner of the podium, and finally pulled Gwen under the table of the laboratory podium. With a click, several books scattered and fell under the table, and the seemingly empty laboratory returned to silence again. The small square space under the podium table was narrow and dark. Shinen and Gwen were almost face to face. They were so close that their warm breaths blew on each other's faces, and they could vaguely hear each other's accelerated heartbeats. Shinen, what are you doing? The blonde girl blinked in confusion, her sapphire eyes flashing with clear light. I want to borrow your ability, Shinen said seriously. Although we don't know why the female agent Natasha came, it is best to take preventive measures in advance and obtain Chingmei Gwen's super spider ability. If any emergency situation arises later, she can handle it. Borrow ability. The blonde girl Gwen was stunned for a moment, and then quickly understood what Shinen meant. Her fair cheeks and ears turned red, and actual steam almost came out of her head. In school, or in this place? Gwen bit her shiny pink lower lip and glanced at the laboratory outside. The exposed skin was slightly red. If you don't want to, forget it. Shinen didn't force it. After all, for Gwen, who was still the squad leader, it was really too exciting under the podium. Who said, unwilling? Gwen tried her best to spit out these words, and the sound she made was as small as a mosquito, making people doubt that she was not bitten by a super spider. Shinen didn't think anything of it at first, but now that he saw Gwen being so shy, his heart beat loudly, and his body temperature rose along with the close body. Then I'll start. Shinen looked at the small girl's face nearby and suddenly felt that his lips were a little dry. Gwen closed her eyes nervously, her long eyelashes trembling slightly, her chin raised at a suitable angle, and her bright pink lips slightly opened. Shi-young took a breath, gently held the girl's shoulders with his hands, and lowered his head forward. Seeing that the two were about to touch each other, however, at this moment. Tap. A sudden sound of footsteps came from the corridor, and the man crossed the door and entered the interior of the laboratory. Under the podium table, the bodies of Shinen and Gwen suddenly stiffened, and they remained motionless, even their breathing slowed down subconsciously. I wish I were a classmate and would leave soon. However, the sound of footsteps was still approaching, coming towards the podium where they were. I almost forgot something again. The man muttered to himself helplessly, came to the laboratory podium, and began to clean the glassware and other items on the table. It's Dr. Kurt Connors. Shinen and Gwen didn't dare to take a breath, looking outside the table at the shiny leather shoes of the PhD teacher close at hand. If discovered, the consequences would be unimaginable. Fortunately, Dr. Kurt didn't tidy up for long. In less than half a minute, he put away all the things on the table, and did not find the two Shinen hiding under the table. However, just when Dr. Kurt was about to leave with his things, there was a clang sound. A glass cup fell from the lectern to the ground. The cup did not break. It fell on the ground and continued to roll inward, rolling into the bottom of the lectern. Dr. Kurt sighed and immediately bent down to pick it up. Shinen and Gwen's pupils shrank slightly. But the next moment, changes occurred. Before Dr. Kurt's waist could bend down, his body suddenly trembled violently, his hands suddenly rested on the desk, and he let out a low growl deep in his throat that was unlike anything a human could make. At this time, the originally gentle voice became hoarse, and Dr. Kurt covered his mouth with force to prevent himself from actually roaring. His gentle face was filled with an expression of pain, the desk he was holding on with both hands made a squeaking sound, and his shirt and suit were inexplicably torn apart by the swelling muscles. Under the lectern, Shinen and Gwen watched this scene in amazement. They saw that from the leather shoes that Dr. Kurt had forced open, two ferocious, wide, green-scaled feet were revealed, which overall resembled a lizard. At the same time, a thick green-scaled long tail stretched out from behind the white coat Dr. Kurt was wearing, violently pumping the air left and right, and a whirring sound suddenly occurred in the laboratory. The floor was trampled to pieces, the blackboard was cracked, and deep scratches were left on the tabletop. Dr. Kurt at the table reveals his true monster form. The doctor is actually a lizard. A thought came to Shinen's mind, and along with the sweet breath, a soft and gentle touch that could not be ignored came from his lips. Shinen opened his eyes wide, and what came into view was the girl's small and delicate face. Without thinking too much, Shinen suddenly took the initiative and forcefully demanded the medium inside Gwen's lips. Buzz. The two highly tacit spider senses first touched tentatively, then became deeply entangled, and even wanted to completely merge into one. The account password is entered correctly. The extraordinary spider version of Shinen is back online. Tap. Unaware of what was happening under the table, Dr. Kurt, whose body transformed into a giant lizard, stumbled out of the laboratory door. The next moment Dr. Kurt left. In the laboratory, the table on the podium flew open. Gwen, your clothes are in my school bag, Shinen said quickly as he stood up. Okay, I'll change my clothes right now, and you find a way to get everyone in the school to evacuate urgently. By the way, there's something in my locker for you, remember to get it first. Gwen quickly threw this sentence, and without waiting for Shinen's response, he rushed out of the laboratory nimbly and quickly. Shinen followed Gwen out of the laboratory and rushed to the office building opposite the teaching building alone. Arrived at the main entrance of the office building, Shinen happened to meet Instructor Roth, who was walking out of the office building. When Instructor Roth saw him, he immediately waved and said, "Shinen, I just wanted to find you." Looking for me? Shinen was stunned. It's the new Dean of Teaching. She specifically mentioned your name and asked you to go to the Dean's office right now. Instructor Roth patted him on the shoulder and said, "That's no problem." Shinen agreed first, and then said seriously, "Instructor, listen to me. I just saw Dr. Kurt turned into a lizard monster. I'm worried that the teachers and students of the school will be in danger. Please take the students in the teaching building to evacuate first." Instructor Roth was shocked and asked in disbelief, Dr. Kurt, lizard monster. Is it true? I just saw it with my own eyes. Shinen said firmly. If it were an ordinary teacher or instructor, facing such bizarre words from students, I'm afraid they would just treat it as a joke. But Shinen believed in Instructor Roth. After all, they had experienced the New York War together. Instructor Roth was silent for a moment, then nodded seriously. I know, I will go to evacuate the students of the school now. Shinen breathed a sigh of relief and continued to walk into the office building and headed to the director's office. He was afraid that Instructor Roth alone would not be convincing enough, and it happened that the Dean of Teaching had something to ask him. The school office building, an office almost at the top end. Shinen came here quickly and knocked on the half-open door. Come in. A slightly cold woman's voice came from the gap in the door. Shinen immediately pushed the door open and walked in. He could see that the curtains in the director's office were lowered, causing the indoor light in the office to be slightly dim. On the office chair sat a beautiful young woman with a leopard print coat on her shoulders, or rather, it would be more appropriate to describe her as a lady. After all, the other party's temperament was elegant and luxurious, and her figure was at the most mature and plump stage of a woman. Because of proper maintenance, there was no trace of time on her face. The beautiful lady's legs were bare from her knees down, sticking out from under the inner brown sweater, casually together. When sitting, because the sweater was rolled up a little, the round and slender thighs were very close to the intersection. This is a beautiful, mature, top-notch beauty that can attract men. It was comparable to Natasha that Shinen had seen, but with a hint of natural wildness. By the way, is this really the Dean of Education who maintains school discipline? Are you sure it won't cause any negative effects? Shinen couldn't help but complain in his heart, and instinctively felt that something was wrong, so he opened the door wide and let the light behind him penetrate into the office. Close the door. Barbara turned her office chair slightly and said to Shinen at the door. Well, why do you want to close the door? Shinen felt more and more wrong. Barbara smiled mysteriously, and her lips painted with dark lipstick opened slightly, because what I'm about to tell you is about Diana Prince, the Wonder Woman. Are you sure you don't want to close the door? Before she finished her words, the door was closed heavily. In the completely closed office, the light was even dimmer than before. Who are you? Shinen stared at Barbara coldly. Little kid, don't be too impatient. Barbara turned the office chair back to the front and pointed at the chair opposite the table. Sit down and talk. Shinen took a deep breath and chose to sit down opposite the table. Yes, that's good. Barbara's delicate and charming face became more and more happy. Across a fairly large office desk, she looked more and more pleased with Shinen. My name is Barbara Minerva. According to seniority and the relationship between Diana and me, you should call me Aunt or Aunt Leopard. Barbara Minerva, Leopard. Shinyen's pupils shrank slightly, remembering that when Aunt Diana talked about her past in the bathroom, she mentioned a close friend and enemy named Cheetah. Cheetah is not the name of a superhero, but a complete super-villain. Seeing Shinyen's reaction, Barbara said with some surprise, it seems that Diana has told you about her identity and some things about me. Then you should also know that I put the photo of Wonder Woman into your house. That's right. Shinen paused and said sincerely, I have to thank you for this. Thank me? Why? Barbara was a little surprised. Shinen responded, because your photo gave me and my aunt the opportunity to break the estrangement that has existed for 16 years. The surprise on Barbara's face remained for a while, and suddenly she laughed forward and backward, so that her chest wrapped in a sweater shook violently. I really didn't expect it. I thought that after you knew Diana's identity, you would start to fear and stay away from her. Unexpectedly, your relationship has become even more intimate. After Barbara said this with a smile, she suddenly took off the leopard coat on her shoulders, revealing her body wrapped tightly in a sweater dress. Are you ready to take action? Shinen frowned. He now had Gwen's super spider ability, so he was not afraid of Leopard. Even if he couldn't beat her, he could at least escape. But now he didn't have any battle clothes or identity disguise. Once he took action, he would undoubtedly expose his extraordinary ability. Unless he had no choice, he couldn't use the spider ability he had at the moment. Thinking of this, Shinen quickly said, there is a lizard monster in the school now, and I'm afraid it will invade here. Lizard monster. Barbara sneered. It's that Dr. Kurt Connors. I've discovered that your school is not simple, and the doctors are all disgusting weirdos. But what does this have to do with me? My only target is you. As Barbara said this, she suddenly squatted down her graceful body and got under the office chair. Her slender hands painted with dark nail polish slid up along Shinyen's heels until they grabbed one side of the office chair's armrest. The upper body of the leopard woman stretched out from under the table and raised up, using her proud body to trap Shinyen on the chair, and her narrow and beautiful eyes flashed with a faint green light of animality. Diana is really well fed. You must taste very good, let me eat you. Eat people. Aunt Diana didn't say that the leopard woman would eat people. It seems that she has completely become a beast now. Shinyen's body couldn't help but tense up, the super spider sense kept warning, and the fingers clenched into fists couldn't help but move. There was no way, he could only resist at the risk of exposing the super spider's ability. Shinyen narrowed his eyes slightly. But at this moment, a sharp and piercing fire alarm suddenly sounded outside the office. Then, there were the shouts and screams of many teachers and students. Among them, there was a low roar like a beast. It came from the opposite teaching building. Obviously, something really happened. Shinyen was about to raise his foot to kick the leopard girl in front of him away, but he never thought that the leopard girl's action was one step ahead of him. I saw that the leopard girl stretched out her bright red tongue full of glittering water, and suddenly licked Shinyen's slightly sweaty face. Realizing what was going to happen, Shinyen opened his eyes in shock. At the same time, bang, the window covered by the curtains in the office suddenly broke open, accompanied by countless glass fragments thrown into the room, and a slender black figure broke in from the outside and kicked the leopard girl in front of Shinyen away with one foot. The office chair where Shinyen was sitting slid back a little, pulling a certain distance, so that he could see the existence of the intruder. It was the new instructor Natasha Romanov. She was still slim and charming with her short dark red hair, but she changed back to the black leather agent uniform, which made her look a little colder and more indifferent. Black Widow. The leopard woman, who had slammed against the wall, sneered and stood up again without any problem. Her high heels had fallen off the ground. She stood on tiptoes with her bare feet like a beast, staring coldly at the Black Widow who had broken into the room. He is my target. The Black Widow glanced at Shinyen, and her eyes quickly fell on the leopard woman, and she took out a special black pistol from her waist. No one can steal my prey. The leopard woman laughed. Shinyen's eyes twitched wildly, looking at the two fierce and beautiful women facing each other in front of him. Both the target and the prey, it seems that he has been underestimated. Wait, how come this is a bit like the powerful females in the animal world fighting for some kind of dominance? Inside the school office, Black Widow held a special gun, and Leopard Girl's eyes flashed, and they faced each other beautifully. Shinyen sat on a chair, between the two, and outside the battle, next to the wall behind. It was like a world-famous painting. Facing the threat of the black muzzle, Leopard Girl had been standing still, and in the next moment, her body suddenly leaned forward and crouched down, bursting with extremely fast acceleration, sprinting forward. Black Widow narrowed her beautiful eyes, held the pistol steadily, and pulled the trigger with extremely fast reaction. Bang, 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 3 consecutive shots with silencer effect. Leopard Girl's eyes swayed like green flames, and her raised toes stomped on the ground wildly and powerfully. Her agile body moved swiftly in the shape of the letter Z, like a human-shaped beautiful mother leopard, and she actually dodged 3 close-range shots indoors. The bullet landed on the ground beside her, sparks flew everywhere, and a deep crater was left. Looking at the cheetah who was approaching with a gust of wind, Black Widow aimed at her forehead and continued to pull the trigger, then abandoned the pistol and swung her fist to hit. Cheetah seemed to have sensed something and sank her body down, barely avoiding the bullet that passed through her curly hair, and at the same time swung her right palm forward. Snap! The hand weapon with a unique shape called Widow's Sting worn by Black Widow, and the sharp and hard nails on Cheetah's fingers, which became like claws, collided violently and powerfully. Swish! Black Widow's pupils shrank, and her bracelet weapon, Widow's Sting, invented by Soviet scientists and technicians and processed and modified by S.H.I.E.L.D., was scratched by the opponent's claws like a leopard's claws. Several deep cracks immediately appeared on the surface of Widow's Sting, and the depth of the cracks even touched the epidermis of the fingers protected by the gloves. Leopard Girl also suffered a great loss due to her carelessness. From the damaged Widow sting scratched by Black Widow, an electric current of up to tens of thousands of volts surged out, quickly moving up along the claws to shock the whole body. This electric shock was enough to easily knock down an ordinary adult man. Leopard Girl just groaned in pain, and her body movements were not coordinated enough, causing the power of the other hand that secretly grabbed Black Widow's chest to drop suddenly. The claws only scratched the black special agent leather jacket, and a pair of purple clothes tightly wrapped in it jumped out. Black Widow didn't care about this at all, and her knees were raised up rapidly, aiming at the opponent's lower abdomen. Leopard Girl twisted her body to avoid it, and lightly jumped away from Black Widow. People in the air. Leopard Girl seemed to feel that the tight sweater on her body hindered her movement. Her hands like claws immediately grabbed her sweater, and the whole brown winter women's sweater was immediately torn in half, and a graceful and mature body broke out from it. This is really a fierce and eye-catching battle. However, Shinen is not in the mood to notice this. At this moment, his body is beginning to demonstrate unprecedented changes. Already possessing Gwen's super spider mutant physique, and just now reaching the conditions of close contact and exchange of media with Leopard Girl, Shinyen's current body has acquired a second ability, Leopard Girl's ability. Leopard Girl's ability is somewhat special. It is not an innate gene, nor an acquired mutation, but a gift from the old gods, a curse that requires a price. Spider ability is itself the top predator ability of insects, and Leopard Girl ability is also the top predator ability of animals. Now, two different types of predators' extraordinary abilities overlap, merge, and strengthen in Shinyen's universal compatible physique. This magical scene, Cheetah Girl and Black Widow, who were in a passionate battle, naturally did not notice it. After passing by and confronting each other again, Leopard Girl suddenly sneered, "Don't you want to eat too?" "What did you say?" Black Widow pretended not to understand and retorted, "How about together? I don't mind." Leopard Girl continued to induce, licking her dark lips with her tongue. Black Widow couldn't help but think about it. She didn't have this idea at first, but when Leopard Girl suddenly said this, she actually felt a little moved in her heart. Who is wrong? And at this time, Leopard Girl's eyes suddenly became sharp, and her originally smooth, white body without anything suddenly appeared a layer of leopard fur on her body. A leopard tail twitched and emerged from behind strangely, and her palms turned into truly ferocious leopard claws, and her ears were also pointed and slender, tending to be leopard-like. Human-shaped female leopard. This is the real posture of Leopard Girl when fighting. Leopard Girl's body in full ability form moved, and the speed was 2 or 3 times faster than before. Black Widow was startled, watching the Leopard Girl in front of her with a residual image, and she only had time to raise her arms and cross them in front of her chest to block. Swish. Scarlet warm blood splashed. The special agent leather jacket was easily torn apart, and 5 shocking scratches clearly appeared on the Black Widow's reinforced body and arms. Under the powerful impact of the Leopard Girl's slap, her back hit the empty window, and the whole person was thrown out of the window on the 4th floor. "Are you worthy of sharing the prey with me?" Leopard Girl shook off the blood on her claws, and her eyes were full of wild ferocity. "Little friend, no one will disturb us now, let's have a good time." Leopard Girl turned and looked at the wall on one side, but found Shinen sitting on a chair, lowering his head under his legs. "Are you scared?" Cheetah walked forward a few steps with a cat step, and her toes curved to her thighs, revealing the beauty of solid muscles. When walking, the muscles are tightened and relaxed at any time, and the power of the limbs is controlled at will. The naked human-shaped leopard body has a most primitive and special beauty. Beast control ecstasy. When it was about 3 meters away from Shinen, the Leopard Girl's narrow beast eyes shrank slightly, and found that on the left arm covered by Shinen's sleeves, there were golden beams interweaving and glowing, like a burning holy flame. "Diana actually gave all this to you." Leopard Girl recognized the protective silver bracelet at a glance, and was surprised, but sneered nonchalantly, "What a pity. Diana came here in person. I might still be a little afraid, and her silver bracelet weapon, or a single one, can't pose much threat to me at all." Shinen didn't speak. Cheetah Girl obviously made a wrong judgment. It's not that Shinen is using the power of the artifact's silver bracelet, but that the silver bracelet is awakening and starting on its own, helping Shinen suppress the terrifying wildness in his body. Leopard Girl saw that Shinen had no reaction, and subconsciously reached out her hand, but before she touched Xinyan's body, she shrank back as if it was hot. Her leopard hair exploded for no reason. What's going on with this inexplicable palpitation? Before Leopard Girl could think about it, along with the strong vibration of hitting the building, the roof of the office ceiling behind Leopard Girl suddenly broke open. Covered with the dazzling daylight outside, a tall and beautiful figure fell from the sky. Before landing, a golden rope was like a firefly, winding around Leopard Girl's waist for several circles. Looking down at the familiar rope and the familiar sense of restraint, Leopard Girl was stunned for a moment, then gritted her teeth, and finally spit out a sentence. "You are here after all." Buzz. Two golden dazzling divine flames suddenly glowed at different locations in the room. The rays of light were intertwined and pulled together, and they wanted to merge into one body. The protective silver bracelet hidden under the sleeve of his left hand by Shinen echoed the exact same item worn on the slender wrist of the tall and beautiful person who broke into the office. Leopard Girl Barbara was between the two of them. She hadn't turned around yet. Looking at the noose tied around the leopard's waist, her demonic face suddenly turned ferocious, and she couldn't hide her anger and screamed, "Diana!" "Auntie!" Shinen looked up in surprise. The person who landed from the sky behind Leopard Girl was none other than Auntie Diana. At this time, Diana is wearing Wonder Woman's exclusive superhero suit, her stunningly beautiful face is cold and calm, her thin eyebrows with sword-edged points are raised heroically, and she is clutching the shimmering golden lasso of mantra tightly in her hand. Beautiful, elegant and giving people a strong sense of peace of mind. Shinen is not young anymore, but when he sees Aunt Diana coming to the rescue, she still suddenly wants to hug her. "Just leave this place to me. You can leave here first." Diana could sense the characteristics of the artifact and knew that something was wrong with Shinen's condition, so she spoke softly. "Okay." Shinen nodded quickly, ignored the Leopard Girl in front of him, and immediately stood up from the chair and left for the office door. He knew that Aunt Diana was completely capable of dealing with the Leopard Girl, and even if he stayed, he would be in the way, and even expose the secret of the Master's ability. And Diana must have thought of this. After so many years, Shinen and Diana have long developed a high degree of tacit understanding. After confessing the secrets of their identities and abilities, their mutual trust and trust have reached a new level. "Don't even think about leaving." The Leopard Girl realized that Diana and Shinen seemed to be ignoring her the whole time, without saying a word to her, and she didn't know who to be jealous of. She suddenly rushed towards Shinen, who was about to leave the office like a female leopard. Faced with the strong wind blowing behind him and the chill coming from the sharp claws in the air, Shinen didn't pay any attention. Only then did Leopard Girl rush to about 1 meter behind Shinen. The lasso around her waist suddenly tightened. Wonder Woman pulled the mantra lasso back, like a warrior subduing a fierce horse, pulling her back. The Leopard Woman's feet plowed back on the floor, leaving 2 obvious traces of the beast's feet. Leopard Girl scratched at the air helplessly and furiously. She could only stare at Shinen without looking back, opened the door of the office and walked out. Knowing that Wonder Woman is present, he will definitely not be able to succeed again. The anger on Leopard Girl's face quickly turned to indifference. She turned back to look at Wonder Woman and suddenly revealed a charming smile. "I didn't expect that you could bear not to eat him." Wonder Woman was as dignified and elegant as ever, her expression calm and unwavering. "He is just my child." "Really? I don't believe it." Leopard Girl let out a low roar, with an afterimage on her body, and violently rushed towards Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman held the mantra lasso in one hand, and quickly took off a dark golden battle shield from her back with the other hand. She pushed it forward and launched a powerful shield strike, blocking a pair of leopard claws from the shield. Stinging sparks are flying. Leopard Girl originally wanted to bypass the battle shield at the moment of the fight and directly attack Wonder Woman's body, but in the next moment, she was knocked backwards by Diana's forehead with the starlight flying crown. The Leopard Girl looked up in pain, only to meet a pair of calm, yet heart-stopping eyes. "Barbara, it's okay if you want to hurt me. But you shouldn't do anything to him." At this moment, the only demigod on Earth showed unprecedented anger. Shinen left the office building and went directly to the teaching building. Compared with Diana's situation where there was no suspense, he was more worried about Gwen's situation, which was still unknown. Shinen's speed is getting faster and faster, with the strong wind making a sound, and his steps are as fast as flying. He felt that his current state was very strange. He had almost inexhaustible physical strength and vitality. He could control the limbs and muscles of his body at will, and could easily control and release every force in his body. Possessing the abilities of Super Spider and Leopard Girl at the same time, Shinion's current physical strength is extremely strong. Due to the divine power of guarding the silver bracelet suppressing the animal nature, his body showed no signs of leopard transformation and looked no different from an ordinary human being. Quickly enter through the door of the teaching building. Shinion's eyes glanced sharply and quickly. The current teaching building was empty. The floors, walls, and even ceilings of the halls, corridors, and ceilings were all severely damaged by inhuman forces. A mess was left on the ground. Lots of books and paper. Shinion took a special look at the monitoring room on the first floor and found that the school guard who was originally on duty was missing. The mainframe and computer in the room were in pieces, as if they had been crushed by a giant hand. This made Shinion secretly relieved. After all, the surveillance not only captured the doctor's secrets, but also captured the secrets of him and Gwen. There were traces of a fight at the scene. It was Gwen and Dr. Lizard. Shinion glanced at him and thought very quickly. He directly demonstrated and analyzed the fight scene in his brain. But, where have people gone now? Shinion frowned. He pricked up his ears and listened. There was not a single sound from the entire teaching building. After the teachers and students were evacuated, Spider-Woman and Dr. Lizard, who were fighting in the teaching building, also mysteriously disappeared. Shinion suddenly remembered something and took a quick step to the exclusive locker for his class. Skillfully taking out the key from his trouser pocket, Shinion opened Gwen's locker, revealing a school bag lying quietly in the small locker. Take out your school bag and open the zipper. Shinion was suddenly stunned, but what was placed in the school bag turned out to be another set of Spider Hood uniforms, the same style as the one Gwen wore as the female Spider-Man, with the same black and white background, but the whole body has spider mesh patterns, making it look more masculine. The size of the spider suit is obviously much larger, and it is clearly prepared for men. There is a white spider pattern printed on the front of the top. There is a small heart-shaped card on the clothes, with an English message from Gwen Wansho. To Shinion Prince. When did you make it? Shinion's heart warmed, and he continued to rummage in his school bag and found a small white vest. No hesitation. Shinion picked up the white vest, put it in front of his nose and took a deep sniff. Well, let me make it clear first that he is not a pervert. Shinion closed his eyes, and the faint fragrance seemed to pour into his brain from his nose. Under the strong stimulation, his blood began to boil with excitement. As if the most primitive and wild hunting instinct has been stimulated, thousands of mixed smells in the teaching building are like colorful paints of different shades flowing quietly. 3 seconds later, I found you, Gwen. Shinion muttered to himself, targeting one of the familiar smells. On the first floor of the teaching building, there is the archives room. In the middle of the archives room, there is a huge hole on the tiled floor. The hole seemed to have been dug not long ago, with a radius of 1 meter wide, and a lot of gravel and soil around it. Shinion put on the hooded spider suit given by Gwen, and his body showed muscle curves like an assembly line. He squatted slightly on the edge of the hole and looked down at the bottom of the hole to see the bottomless mysterious interior. Hold your breath. Shinion jumped directly into the hole. Falling in free fall. Shinion fell about 20 or 30 meters deep, and was about to touch the ground underground. Above the vaguely watery underground, about half a meter low in the sky, there were several white lines that were difficult to see clearly. Thin lines. It's Gwen's spider silk. Shinion suddenly had a thought in his mind. He put his hands on both sides of the hole to cushion the fall, and landed lightly on the tough spider silk that Gwen had set up before. With faint green pupils appearing in his eyes, Shinion lay on several spider threads, looked at the dark environment around him, and found that the hole reached an underground sewer. The space in the sewer is narrow, dark and suffocating. Shinion didn't think too much and quickly walked along the spider thread that extended infinitely towards an underground passage. Sometimes he was like a spider crawling on the web, sometimes like a cheetah running wildly at the bottom of the pipe. The underground sewers are designed to go round and round, with branches. It is even more difficult to sense the direction in the dark underground. Shinion was not afraid of losing his way. First, He had the spider silk left by Gwen to guide him, and second, Gwen's scent was also locked in him. But the more he walked along the passage that Gwen walked, the more Shinen frowned. This underground pipeline was like another world. The passage lines were intricate and it was a hidden area that the sun could never touch. What kind of evil things will breed in such an underground area? Shinen quickly traveled 2 or 3 kilometers through the underground waterway. Just when he suspected that he was no longer in the same city area as his original school, a subtle smell of blood came from his nose. It's Gwen and she's hurt. Realize this. Shinen's eyes suddenly turned cold, and the magical light of the magical protective silver bracelet was almost unable to suppress the wild nature in his body. Tap. Shinen's palms and feet landed on the slope of the underground pipe at the same time, and he sprinted directly on the 90-degree slope, raising his already fast speed to another level. Under the airflow generated when the body moves at high speed, the water under the pipe splashes back. Shinen soon saw that at the open intersection of underground pipes ahead, a 2 to 3 meter tall humanoid lizard monster was confronting a slender figure several meters apart. The female Spider-Man's left calf was scratched, making it difficult to move. Her back was leaning against one wall of the pipe. Under the highly similar spider sense, the female Spider-Man seemed to be aware of it and looked sideways at Shinen approaching from the side pipe. At the same time, the humanoid lizard monster looked ferocious, like a small dinosaur, and seized this opportunity to pounce towards the female Spider-Man. But a figure is obviously faster than him. Get away. Shinen was like a human cannonball, violently hitting the human lizard monster and knocking him away. Be careful. But seeing this scene, the female Spider-Man shouted loudly in warning. Shinen narrowed his eyes slightly, and in the air at the intersection of the pipelines, he almost twisted his waist with wild instinct and spun his long and slender body at high speed. Laugh, laugh. The sound of breaking wind suddenly sounded underground, and 2 mechanical claws that looked like octopus tentacles passed by the side and plunged into the pipe water flow under Shinen's body, causing a burst of water. By rotating his body to avoid the sneak attack of the mechanical tentacles, Shinen also saw a middle-aged man wearing sunglasses hanging in a corner on the top floor of the underground pipe at the moment he turned around. There are 2 other mechanical tentacles hanging on the wall as if absorbed on the back. Squidward, call out. At this time, a white spider silk accurately hit Shinen, who was about to fall into the water. Shinen didn't resist and allowed the owner of the spider thread to pull him over. Finally meeting up with Gwen, Shinen landed on the ground of the pipe, reached out to support the other person's slender body, and asked quickly, "Are you okay?" "It's just my foot injury, I'm okay." Spider-Woman gasped. "Do you know the one with 4 mechanical claws?" Shinen glanced at the middle-aged man and asked the female Spider-Man. Spider-Woman whispered, "Have you forgotten? He is Otto Gunther Octavius, a famous local physics doctor in Washington. He came to our school to watch the event a year ago." Another doctor, Shinen suddenly remembered. Previously, Leopard Girl once mentioned that the doctors in their school were all weirdos. Isn't this a weirdo? It's Dr. Lizard again, it's Dr. Octopus again. Let's open a zoo here, right? If you include the spiders and cheetahs on their side, it can be regarded as a big animal fight. Just listen to a pop sound. Dr. Lizard jumped out of the rapid water in the sewer and landed on the pipe floor on the other side. A pair of green animal eyes stared coldly at the 2 Shinen. GG. Dr. Octopus, with 4 mechanical tentacles on his back, climbed on the top of the pipe and quickly came to the top of the humanoid lizard monster. He said with a little dissatisfaction, "You did a good job, attracting 2 little spiders. Stop talking nonsense, let's deal with them first," Dr. Lizard said hoarsely. "Since they have seen us and know our secrets, it is naturally impossible to let them go back up." Dr. Octopus smiled coldly, "As long as that girl doesn't come." Half a year ago, the 2 doctors used the school's underground pipeline to carry out some inhumane scientific research experiments underground. As a result, just when there were some results, a female student from the lower grade of the school came over and said that she knew what they did. If they continued, they would inform the school and the police. Dr. Lizard and Dr. Octopus wanted to threaten the girl, but at that time, the female student punched her feet. Just one punch, and now there is still a huge bottomless pit in the underground pipeline space there. From that day on, Dr. Lizard and Dr. Octopus could only suspend the experiment indefinitely. Until recently, when the female student never came to school again, they could not help but start the experiment again. As for the experiment, it was undoubtedly successful. The result of the experiment is their extraordinary posture at the moment. Dr. Lizard gained the ability to regenerate broken limbs and transform into a powerful humanoid lizard. Dr. Octopus merged with 4 mechanical claws, and the intelligent information of the brain and mechanical tentacles formed a new nervous system. In the narrow and dark sewer, the giant beast like Dr. Lizard, Dr. Octopus with mechanical claws, and Shinen, who was wearing a uniform hooded spider suit, confronted each other. Gurgle. The cold wastewater rushed in the middle of the waterway. Shinen, who possessed the abilities of both Super Spider and Leopard Woman, was very sensitive and had a beast-like supernatural intuition. He could clearly perceive that the 2 doctors in front of him were full of evil thoughts and murderous intentions. They really wanted to kill him and Gwen here. Has humanity been annihilated? Looking down at the shocking scratches on Gwen's left calf, Shinyen's eyes, which were faintly flashing with green pupils, became more and more cold. We each take one. I'll deal with Dr. Lizard, and you deal with... Hey. Before Spider-Man finished her words, Shinen, who was next to her, suddenly stretched out her hand and picked her up in a princess hug. Want to escape? Dr. Octopus smiled coldly, looking down at Shinen from a high position. Dr. Lizard's eyes flashed with red blood, and saliva kept flowing out from his fangs. Like a ferocious humanoid dinosaur, his mind was on the verge of losing control and going berserk. Shinen ignored them, but said to the light female Spider-Man in his arms, "Hold me tight." Gwen wrapped her hands wrapped in tight sleeves around Shinyen's neck, and the red cheeks of the girl under the spider hood showed a worried look, and whispered, "You can't deal with them alone, especially with me. Don't you still have one hand? How do you know if you don't try?" Shinen smiled inexplicably, holding the female Spider-Man's body with one hand, and raising the other hand to be freed. This calm and seemingly contemptuous attitude from the heart. For a time, Dr. Octopus recalled the girl he met half a year ago, which made him tremble with anger all over his body, and the whole person immediately rushed forward like an octopus monster. What a joke. At the same time, the 4 mechanical claws behind him, glowing with cold metallic light, seemed to have independent consciousness, and they stabbed at Shinen like 4 metal venomous snakes. Shinen stood there without any intention of dodging or running away. With one hand holding Spider-Man, his left hand, which was bent into a claw like a cat, suddenly moved. Clang 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 clang. 4 almost overlapping metal collisions sounded, and the 4 mechanical claws that stabbed at Shinen at the same time were all slapped back by Shinyen's single left hand without exception. How is it possible? Dr. Octopus opened his eyes in surprise, and the 4 mechanical claws seemed to be enraged, continuing to rotate and twist forward and stab frantically. The underground sewer suddenly made a crackling sound, the turbid air was pierced sharply, and the mechanical tentacles turned into dense silver light, terrifyingly covering the surrounding area of Shinen. At this moment, the dark blue eyes clearly showed the movement trajectory of all the mechanical tentacles. Shinyen's left hand immediately blocked more quickly and forcefully, blocking all the high-frequency independent mechanical claws half a meter away. Ding ding ding. From a third-party perspective, Dr. Octopus's mechanical claws and Shinyen's left hand all turned into high-speed afterimages, and they were still tied at 4-1. Obviously, manual is faster than mechanical. This is unscientific. Dr. Octopus' eyes were straight under his sunglasses, and his face was full of disbelief. Could it be that the opponent's left hand was also made of machinery? Ruthless iron hand. No, this is more like the left hand of a demon. So powerful. Spider-Man opened her mouth slightly. Under Shinyen's attack, no mechanical claw could get close to her body. Why don't you come to help? Dr. Octopus continued to attack Shinen with his mechanical claws, while looking at Dr. Lizard standing next to him and shouting hurriedly. Dr. Lizard's beast eyes were bright red, looking at Shinen, and biting him ferociously. Shinen narrowed his eyes, holding Spider-Woman in one hand and jumping up, avoiding the sharp claws of Dr. Lizard. While in the air, he kicked down on the opponent's head with both feet, and the force was so great that he suppressed the 2 or 3 meters long lizard Dr. Lizard. Bang! Dr. Lizard fell to the ground with his green scales, and the ground cracked and sunken into an obvious pit. Die! At this time, 4 mechanical claws pierced Shinen, who was standing on Dr. Lizard's body. Shinen took Spider-Woman with him with extremely fast reaction speed, swiftly and directly stepped on the side wall of the underground pipeline, and continued to step up and walk on the top wall. He easily avoided the attack of 4 mechanical claws, and reached out to grab one of them firmly. Shinen used his strength to pull, and lifted up the whole body of Dr. Octopus with one hand, and smashed it heavily on the body of Dr. Lizard, so that the original pit continued to bloom with several cracks. Completed all this. Without even taking a breath, Shinen fell from the top of the upside-down pipe, and his body rotated half a circle in the air, holding Spider-Man and landing lightly on the ground. This is the strength of the 2 abilities of Super Spider and Cheetah. Shinen's body has been strengthened by a double-layer physical ability buff, and the toughness of the tendons, bones and cortex is far beyond that of refined metal. More importantly, the strength, reaction speed, and beast instincts have all been qualitatively improved. Seeing that Dr. Lizard and Dr. Octopus still wanted to struggle to get up, Shinen raised his left hand, and a white spider web immediately covered the 2 at the same time. Shinen continued to wave his wrist, and white spider silk reinforced and wrapped around them, binding them together into a giant zongzi. Did our experiment fail? How could it be? It shouldn't be like this. The sunglasses fell off his face, and Dr. Octopus' eyes were full of confusion, and he muttered to himself like a lunatic. The mechanical tentacles on his back were like poisonous snakes with independent consciousness, and they struggled violently and made a squeak that made people's scalps numb. At this moment, Dr. Lizard suddenly opened his bloody mouth madly, his eyes were full of violence and bloodthirstiness, and he bit Dr. Octopus' neck. Crack, scarlet blood splashed, and Dr. Octopus' neck, which had not been strengthened, was bitten off directly. But the mechanical tentacles on his back had not stopped yet, and suddenly tore open the spider silk that bound the surrounding area, and the counterattack stabbed Dr. Lizard's body nearby, piercing through the giant lizard's eye sockets, mouth, chest, and lower abdomen. A large amount of corrosive green blood gushed out along the 4 mechanical claws, causing the mechanical claws to sizzle with smoke and electricity. The pain caused Dr. Lizard to bite Dr. Octopus's body tighter. Seeing this sudden scene, Shinen and Spider-Man were stunned. It didn't last long. Dr. Lizard and Dr. Octopus, who were entangled together, fell down with their 4 mechanical claws, losing consciousness and intelligence. The 2 different colors of blood flowed quietly, and were washed away by the turbulent wastewater undercurrent next to them. In the underground pipeline, everything returned to calm. Watching Dr. Lizard and Dr. Octopus die together, Shinen and Spider-Man on the side were silent. Who could have imagined such an ending? Dr. Kurt, he is still out of control and has completely become a beast monster. Gwen took off the spider hood, sighed, and said with some sadness, Dr. Otto should also be stimulated by the intelligence system of the mechanical claws behind him. The brain nerves have been controlled by the machine for a long time. Shinen nodded. Obtaining extraordinary things beyond what he can control, and then losing control and losing humanity and bottom line. He can empathize with this. Dr. Lizard and Dr. Octopus now are like Shinen, who was 3 in 1. It's just that Shinen stopped before the cliff and controlled the extraordinary power in time, while the 2 doctors could not stop and continued to lose themselves in the abyss of the extraordinary. At present, the back of the world is exposed to the sun, and extraordinary events are emerging in an endless era. The 2 doctors are just a microcosm and representative. Later, like the 2 doctors, there may be more people who want to explore the extraordinary and eventually get lost in it. Let's go back, Shinen said. Do you want to leave them here? Gwen hesitated. Leave the glory of life in the outside world, and bury the darkness in your heart and possessions under this ground. This should be the ending they want. Shinen thought about it, squatted forward, and put his left hand on the ground near the 2 doctors. The 5 fingers of his left hand suddenly grabbed and pressed down. Crack! The pit that was already full of cracks suddenly broke and collapsed downwards, and the entangled bodies of Dr. Lizard and Dr. Octopus fell down, buried in the rubble and darkness in the real underground where there was no sunlight. Weekend. Shinen was lying on the sofa at home, stroking the young yuan-devouring beast, and was bored. He was watching the TV, which was playing a memorial to 2 doctors who made outstanding contributions to biology and physics respectively, Kurt Connors and Otto Gunther Octavius. So, Ant, the last ant leopard, well, how is Ms. Barbara? Shinen turned over on the sofa and looked up at the owner of the slender and shiny legs that were resting on the back of his head. Diana reached out and played with his hair, and said calmly, nothing happened. However, she probably dared not come to this city again in the past few years. Shinen shrank his neck inexplicably, and could imagine that the leopard girl at that time must have been ravaged very badly. After all, when he rushed back to school, he could only see the back of the leopard girl fleeing in panic. Okay, stay at home by yourself, I'm going to work, Diana said, while gently lifting the back of Shinyen's head and stuffing a pillow into it instead of her legs. Shinen frowned uncomfortably. The pillow was actually quite comfortable, but compared to the former wrapped in a high-quality white gauze skirt, it was obviously far inferior in softness, smoothness, and pleasant satisfaction. After Aunt Diana left home, the house suddenly became deserted, and only Shinen and Xiao Huang were left to guard the house. Even the little Wanda, who was busy at home on weekdays, was gone. According to the arrangement made last week, she was taken to Gotham City for further study by a special car sent by the Wayne Consortium. Oh, right, today is the 7th day since Superman was away. Shinen could recall with his eyes closed that a few days ago, the streets of Metropolis were deserted, countless people took to the streets with flowers in their hands to bid farewell, and the US military also used fighter jets in a big way, as if holding an unprecedented funeral for a president. Unfortunately, Superman did not lie in that luxurious coffin draped with the national flag. While the grand funeral was going on all over the world, Superman, as the human being, Clark Joseph Kent, was lying in an ordinary wooden coffin, and a small-scale farewell funeral was held in front of a suburban house far away from the city. So, at the large funeral, the empty coffin should be the justice and truth of this country. At the small funeral, there were only a dozen people, namely Superman's family, fiancé, colleagues, and members of the Justice League that was being formed. This is what Diana told Shinen after she came back from the small funeral. Shinen knew. This also means that my aunt has decided to inherit Superman's legacy and officially join the Justice League as Wonder Woman, and join forces with other superheroes to fight against possible extraordinary events in the future. This will also be the second extraordinary team formed by superheroes after the Avengers. Shinen shook his head, but he had no idea of joining any alliance. After all, both the Avengers and the Justice League have Iron Man and Batman as the core leaders, and he is not the kind of person who can act and fight according to other people's ideas. If there is a chance in the future, it is better to create an alliance by himself. Let alone other members, at least Gwen is one, right? Shinen quickly put this immature idea behind his head, picked up the Yuan Devourer Xiao Huang in his arms, got up from the sofa and muttered a little bored, why don't I take you to see Barry Allen? He has taken care of you for a while, and he specially invited you last time. Meow. Xiao Huang blinked and raised a cat paw with pink pads. 5 cans of fish. Deal, Shinen said generously. So, very quickly, Shinen changed into clothes for going out, carrying an ordinary school bag, and a small orange head poked out of the bag. It was sunny outside, and people were coming and going on the street. Some street walls were graffitied with patterns commemorating Superman, and billboards on the streets and alleys flashed Superman from time to time. It seemed that Superman was still alive and there were Superman everywhere. Shinen carried the little emperor in his school bag and walked along the pedestrian street to the address Barry Allen mentioned. However, he only walked halfway. When crossing the sidewalk with zebra crossing, Shinen was slightly stunned, but in the oncoming crowd, there was a figure in a yellow robe that was very conspicuous. It was a bald woman wearing a strange and clean yellow robe, with her hands behind her back, standing straight and motionless in the middle of the sidewalk at the intersection. Whether it was the strange dress similar to the monk's robe or her behavior of standing in the middle of the road, she seemed to stand out from the crowd and different from ordinary people. But many passers-by who passed by the woman on both sides, and even the people on the whole street, seemed to have not seen her at all. Shinen paused. His first thought was, could it be that he encountered something so-called indescribable? You can't see the fear that I see. After dismissing the somewhat funny thoughts in his mind, Shinen hesitated, moved the backpack on his back to his chest, and pretended not to see and continued to walk forward. Just as Shinen was about to pass by the woman like other passers-by, the woman smiled faintly, looked at him, and said, "My name is Ji Yu Yi. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more."